Not right now. So then, yeah. But now we're going live, hopping that up there. So going back into the Discord here. I super appreciate everybody coming in. Downer.energy, I didn't even see you pop in. Congratulations
Hey,
on the
bud.
top. How'd that go today?
Went well. It's going good.
I'm
People like
really
it. It's pretty cool. Just hanging out.
I bet. Is it nerve-wracking
To launch something?
to watch your own drop like that?
I mean, I don't know. I just kind of put it out there. I'm like super lax with it. Like it's one of those where it's like people buy it, people buy it. I'm try like the first few times I was doing like drops like that. Like I made a bunch, right? I was making like my entire like intended production run of them first, and then launching it, and then the I had a bunch of leftovers, and I've done like some like the clean out sales and stuff like that, and all that's worked out. Uh, but like the last couple ones that I've done, I make like one of each color, and then I have like the colorway recipes, and then I just like basically they're made to order. So as people buy them, I just have everything to do it. So there's like a lot less at stake. If nothing sells, nothing sells, right? Like it doesn't actually matter that much. And then I have a couple to give away or whatever because I've already made them or however it works out. But like in general, like I feel like that's the way that I'm going to do it moving forward because then there's almost no stakes. I get to make it. I get to have the whole production process there. I have the colors that I want, and then if people buy it, people buy it, and they do. I've not had any that didn't sell, but yeah.
So you're not sitting there watching the second by second stats on how well the sale's going.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's mostly, I mean, I just get emails when the orders come in, and then probably Monday I'll check those and get everything boxed up and ready to go. And that's about that. It becomes pretty low. It's not like low effort. It's just like it doesn't require like as much active attention as like it used to, like when I was first starting, which is good. I think that's a big one.
Got to get that 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Put forth 20%, get the 80 return. Ooh. Find those little tricks and tips along the way. So Ruby, I really appreciate you guys all coming in for this one because this one I feel it's always really tough, right? There's so many opinions, and even when we're trying not to allow opinions to get into an objective conversation, I feel like, of course, we're kind of bound to have our own perceptions and ideas that are going to end up in that objective category. So I do really appreciate you guys being down to come and chat this one out. Neostalgia, thanks for hopping in. Really appreciate that.
What up?
Hey.
So, of course, kind of looking it over, we have some of the notes here that we were kind of jotting down. And I think one of the biggest things is there actually kind of like an overall idea that you guys would say kind of makes a toy essentially super clean?
So I don't know if I heard the prompt initially or if I was I don't think I saw it, whatever it was. What was the overall theme that we were going for? Or are we just doing the individual questions?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, man. I'm really glad, downer.energy, that you brought that up. So basically, today's discussion was about what makes a good toy, and it's basically a subjective versus objective approach. With the idea being, when we are looking at these toys, like I think we've talked about intent till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, I think there is something like we could all kind of agree. Like, what would you guys think are kind of craftsmanship traits or manufacturing traits that would typically fall into the category of being like a well-constructed toy versus one that's maybe falling short of the mark?
Man, from my perspective, I think it all, like, I know you said we talked about intent, but I think it's intent like entirely, right? Like if I wanted to make something that's like super like, what is it? Who's selling that one that looks like that like Tetsuo the Iron Man style, like just like kind of this someone's been posting this all day. I can't remember who it is. But it's like it is just like all these like kind of wires and like resin all kind of gooped up, and it's totally like just this like face in a like a chunk of plastic like that. I think that thing's fucking awesome, right? And it is like there's nothing like, it's not like a toy figure sort of thing, right? There's nothing like I mean, it's well crafted in the fact that it's like it's a piece of like statuette art that is made there, but I don't think that it's like a toy in the sense that it's like usable or playable or interactive like at all almost, right? So that's where I'll start that one. Somebody else can pick that up.
So obviously then we're talking about, right away getting to that difference between making pure art versus are you making a product, and obviously, in that instance, it may very well be, without much argument, pure art, and therefore, you're allowed certain things of being art. So you're allowed to see, in a painting, you're allowed to see and expect to see some level of brush strokes and, and defects, realizing that it is made by the human hand, versus a product where you do have a certain minimum base of expectations where, it is, quote unquote mass produced or, produced in quantity, where you do expect a certain machine quality, to that. And therefore, the flaws at least should be somewhat consistent. So.
I just want to jump in really quick. Just we had Neil Ewing kind of pop in there. Neil, we're just kind of talking about with it being what makes a good toy. We're currently just kind of going around the group, seeing if we could almost come up with an idea of, well, is there almost general craftsmanship ideas or concepts that make a toy good versus not good? I think with the intent, though, I think we would all agree. The one I hear, even from the most beginning of makers, bubbles. Let's just say it, right? Like, because that's the one thing that very few, from the moment they first cast something, I would imagine that's like the first thing you notice, that you're like, dang, how'd that happen? Mm-hmm. And then you're kind of now trying to figure out how you remove that from the process. And then later, if you decide like, I want this guy to be bubbly or this item to be bubbly, then cool. But like, I think initially, would most not in the casting almost like, would that not be like the first one that most are like, oh dang, bubbles?
Yeah, I actually totally agree. I think bubbles are actually part of, that'd be like if you were in general, I think like almost never is the intent to have bubbles inside of your figure or as a part of your figure, right? So like if you were a painter and like you didn't mix like your pigment with your acrylic base very well, and like you just had like this kind of like chalky shit everywhere, and you're like, this isn't like, I don't know, I'm not making, it's not painting, it's not smooth, I'm not able to actually get what I want out of this, which I think is almost I think a universal like resin experience, right? And like if you're working with that, like that's probably just poor craftsmanship. And like I watched your video, Crumbs, and I was thinking about that, where it's like the intent on those, I think that was like almost the entire problem, is the intent on those was like different than what the outcome was entirely, right? And I think you sort of touched on it in that video where you were like, oh, if I knew it was like this, I would have known what I was purchasing like this, I would have felt better about it. But generally it was like, it was sold as and made to look like it was something else, right? Like it was a separate product. And then what you got was like, the poor craftsmanship version of like that product, right? So I still think, I mean, like I could see a place for bubbles. Like, I don't know, I think if people make like weird one-offs with UV resin, I think you get bubbles and shit all the time mixed in there. But generally,
I always think,
their time.
I think it's based on intent. If you post some figures that are without bubbles and then you sell them to someone and they have bubbles, it's just based on intent. I think it's wrong if you're going to show these off and they don't have any bubbles at all, and then you turn around and sell them to the public with bubbles.
I always go back to, thinking of my college days and my professors that would always come down on you when you, come in the morning, all hungover and everything with your project half done or hastily slopped together. And you try and pass it off of, oh, this was my intent. And, they'd call you out on it, and they'd be like, look, you've got to prove to us first that you know the tools, you know the materials, you have the skills, you know the rules, and then you can talk about, oh, I intentionally did this, and it has to look intentionally. So like if you have a product that, has a couple bubbles that bits and pieces are clean missing off the corners, versus putting out a toy that is solid bubbles. Okay, this, the toy with this, this chock full of bubbles, very clearly I intentionally meant that, versus a couple bubbles here and there that are, read as just flat out defects. So I think if you're going to try and play that, you know, oh, it's my intent for this to be what it is it has to be done with, you know, very, you know, clear intention that you meant for it to have this, that just a couple tiny little flaws is probably not showing intent.
Well, I think about like every other product you buy in your life, right? Like companies don't put out half-made shit. Like, yeah, well, okay.
Have you bought a video game lately?
I was gonna say the game industry is clearly the one who's putting out half-finished products and iterating on it. But like historically, companies and even artists like don't usually put out stuff that's not like ready, right? Like when you're learning, you don't just like put every shitty painting you made out for sale. Maybe you do, I don't know. But like companies don't have that luxury. You don't put out like a car that hasn't been thoroughly designed or tested. Like that's a liability. And that's an extreme example compared to what we're making, but I think the logic still lies that you learn your goddamn tools before you put anything out for sale.
Playing off of what
that's like asking, that's like, you can't tell people, hey, you're a noob, don't sell your work, right? You can say, hey, like, it's obvious that people have standards, but uniforming your standards and practices over people like artists that are rarely self-aware is super difficult. You can say, hey, if you're going to make a run of toys and you're going to try to produce 10 to 12 figures, maybe you shouldn't use a super unforgiving, rigid, fast curing resin and not use a pressure pot. But certain people don't have these tools and they don't have standards and systems in place to properly create things, right? Is something objectively good? Is it subjectively good? Vice versa, bad too, right? But in the end, it's like you could look at Healy Made, right? And say Healy Made is like one of the old school giants of the 3 and 3/4 toy, kit bash toy. If you look at those toys when you photograph them, they're perfect. When you get them, they have minor bubbles and idiosyncrasies in them. But also you see new makers that are charging $75, $80 for a toy, and it's rife with bubbles and it's all fucked up and you have creases and kibble all over it. And these people go into a market and they say, oh, hey, this is what a toy is going for. I'm going to compete at that. But the standards for them, they don't understand, right? But it's up to the community to say, hey, this shit is unacceptable. You actually have uncured resin in here. You know, that's for purchasers to say, hey, this shit is unacceptable.
And it becomes our responsibility that the creator's been doing it for a while to tell people that are new to it, to say that this is what's going on, to help everyone out that are just started. I think that it's our responsibility to do that.
Now, going back to Cody's point a minute ago, though, just like the video game companies, I'm going to start releasing half-finished resin work and promise a patch in 6 months.
You can just super glue it on. It'll be just fine.
I have to chime in because there was one thing brought up there. Uncured resin. No. Like, I'm really sorry. That one, that's not an opinion. That's not objective. like, no. Uncured resin, no. Because
have you ever gotten a piece like that?
I have one piece that I will never mention, only because that individual was not going to sell it, and I basically begged them to sell this for me. And I purposely then went and got UV curing resin, and I took care of sealing it in. And I knew, and even this individual said, like they really didn't want to. They addressed the fact, they were like, I can't. And I was very much like, you can to me, and I will never talk about it. And you give it to me, and I will never photograph it. I will never show it off. But like, I'd like that piece, please, very much. So I was willing to bend, but that, in my opinion, is one of those things that's like,
it's different.
I want to get cancer from it gassing off in my house. Dope. That's on me. Please don't let an uninformed customer end up with a friggin' device or a piece that's going to do that. That's just really dangerous, in my opinion. That enters a whole new ball game. That one's not even like for debate. Sorry.
I was just gonna jump in. I think a lot of maybe issues. Like this all stems from like you have to buy this thing like sight unseen. Basically, there's a couple of photos that somebody posts, and maybe there's like somebody else that says, hey, I got this, and it's cool. But for the most part, when we're buying these things, it's a risk. You know, we don't know the quality of what we're getting until we actually get it. And so, yeah, I mean, we're assuming that risk, but it's a real bummer when it doesn't pan out. You know, like you expect something of a high quality and you get something that's not at all that. Like that's for the amount of money we're spending on these things. Like that's a real major bummer, dude. So I think that's where a lot of this stems from.
Well, like every other market, you buy a toaster that you get it, it doesn't work, you fucking return it. Like you get your money back. There's not this like you just assume the burden of responsibility because you're the customer. That's bullshit. Like,
yeah, I don't know what people generally feel like on that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone like attempting to like recoup like from like something that they were not happy with. You know what I mean? Which is funny because
sure.
I would be like, hey man, this sucks. Like can we work this out? Maybe you know, I'll send it back if you want, whatever, right? Like something like that. But it seems very I don't know. I think it's like when it's so interpersonal, like a lot of this community is, like I don't know that people actually attempt it, which is weird because I agree with you, Aaron. I think, yeah, obviously, like that's like duh. Like don't just take it on the chin, man. Say something.
Right. And like what you just said about it being an interpersonal community, to use that as a cop out to not be responsible for your work is incredibly disrespectful. Yeah. And like I don't accept like I'm an artist, I don't need to be responsible for my work, whatever bullshit. You're putting it out there, you're putting your name on it, your people are paying for it, you're responsible.
I think there should be a separation in you get what you pay for and paying for artist work.
So the one that I've got to kind of bring up, only because we're talking about intent, and this one's kind of weird for me because there was an artist very early on that like everybody loved their work. And the issue is they weren't ready to sell. They felt they were still very in the early beginning stages of learning. But the issue is we were all talking about it. We all loved the work. There was something very abstract about it that we just really dug. And so eventually you're telling this artist, you're like, man, you can't be putting your work up without a price tag on it because we want it. Whether you consider it finished or not, like we are wanting it and we don't know how to get it from you at this point. So I would actually say it becomes very difficult because I'm sure I accidentally pushed this artist earlier than they wanted. But the reality is that there are people right now that are always waiting for this artist to drop something. And even this artist has pieces from like that first run that they're still sitting on because in their mind, there's still a way that will make it look finished. So they're not ready to drop it yet because they still want to play with it and fiddle with it and make sure that it's the creative thing they want to put out there. But if most people saw their work, it's almost like they are purposely and intentionally making the mistakes the focal point. And I think that like a lot of people in the scene see their work and are actually like, ooh, I like the way that the resin is hanging here or it opens there. So that intent becomes so obscure again.
I think a lot of it is like there's no finished pieces, only satisfied artists, right? I think I've said that before in here, right? And so like you can get in these all the time. It happens all the time in all sorts of fields where people don't release music, especially, right? People don't actually finish anything because they never actually feel satisfied with what they're putting out, even though 99.9% of people hearing it, seeing it, experiencing it in whatever form would be like completely satisfied with the reception of that art. And I don't know that it actually, like, you have strong diminishing returns on the top end, a lot of these things, right? Where it's like the more you put into it past a certain noticeable point, like nobody's going to notice or care. Like it's not going to add effectively to the piece. And like you see that in mass produced work all the time. Like you can get a figurine of something, some licensed figurine of something, right? And like it's like a great sculpt, it's whatever. The paint is like really good, and then the eyes are just kind of like bleh. But then like who cares? It's sitting on a shelf 15 feet away from you. You don't actually are staring into the eyes of it, and like so it doesn't matter. You just don't care, right? So withholding that piece to like perfect the eyes doesn't actually get you anything, right? And it's about like I think from an artist standpoint, you have to figure out where that is. It's about not releasing garbage that you don't like, but also not stifling yourself creatively because you're obsessed with getting it to like peak pinnacle perfection in there.
Well, and to the point, that you try and pass it off as art, and it's art, and it's meant to be that way, and there's no consequences, or you're not beholden to the customer. I remember back in I want to say it was the early 80s, there was a very popular fine artist, making the rounds, and basically, without naming names, they were taking pieces of ceramic, gluing them to a canvas and painting on top of it, and they were selling in galleries and museums for tens of thousands of dollars. Except at some point the glue started wearing out, and the ceramic chunks started dropping off of these canvases hanging on the wall. And the excuse at the time was, it's that's the nature of the art. The art's supposed to evolve. And I guarantee you, every single one of those buyers, museums, and galleries called them out and said, oh, no, you're going to fix that or replace it. Yeah. So even in the absolute fine art world, trying to pass off subpar or defective work, people just don't put up with it.
Oh, and you know what? I'll counter that example right there. Just it's an extension of that point. It's like that Banksy piece that was sold at auction that then shredded itself live, like when it was sold, right? So you intentionally, like at point of sale, it destroyed itself, so it was worthless after that, right?
But knowing Banksy, that was his shtick, and
that's the intent, right? And so the intent is to
and people knew that about Banksy, that he pulled that kind of stuff. And that's the thing is, as artists, if our intention is something that is not absolutely clear and evident through our work, we need to put out in our artist statements or bios or interviews or every single customer interaction, hey, this is my art, this is what my art's supposed to be like, and this is what my art is supposed to do, or how it's supposed to behave over time. So if you fail to do that, clearly then you didn't have intent in the first place. That if you're not having enough forethought to make it clear to everybody that this is my intent, this is my line of thought, come back after the fact and say, oh, no, you're making excuses at that point.
Fine art has always been married with bullshit, though. Like conceptual fine art has always been married with the idea of artist statement and the concept of it. You have many early postmodernists and expressionists that had, painted on raw canvas and their materials ate through. Museums still show that shit. People that were experimenting with polymers and plastics in the 30s. And those pieces are falling apart. People still show that because it's important as far as being avant-garde within your practice, your art making practice, and the importance of that in the future of art. We sit at a precipice now where technology has eclipsed fine art, right? And we say, hey, what is the purpose of what we do? And at the base level of the purpose of what we do as toy makers and toy buyers is feeling. We buy this thing and it gives us a feeling. If we sell a thing to a person and they feel like shit for buying it, we're not doing our job. And if we don't do that job, we're obligated to fix that. And if we don't fix that, people are going to talk shit, right? And as a consumer, you can go on Instagram and you can look and say, hey, this person has 4,000 posts, has been on Instagram 8 years, and they've been doing toys and they're selling the toys for whatever, right? And then you can look at somebody who's new, has 300 posts and 5,000 followers because they've been hyped. And you can say, what is their place? How do you know that this person is knowledgeable in what they do, right? And but in the end, artist statements are important, but that's not really a thing we do. That's something that's educated in kind of a different realm from bootleg toys or softfubi, but bootleg toys, essentially, you don't have the QC issues in soft vinyl that you do in bootleg toys.
It depends. Not every port comes out correct.
I mean, soft vinyl, that's somebody else doing that though. If you get, depending upon who you're getting it from. right?
I think every person who does it, they're going to have some errors in it.
Yeah, but I mean, they're accountable for that. You send that back.
Yeah.
Right. If you sell that, if you get a fucked up pour that's bubbly because they poured during wet season and you sell that to somebody, that's on you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the end, like I got fucked up pours from a friend on trade and I sent them back. Right. Because that's unacceptable within that realm of toy. That's a $300 toy.
Oh, at that price point, like, yeah, that should better be perfect. I'm over here thinking about my fucking piddly $30 ones. Oh, it's gotta be perfect on that one. But if you're buying anything for 300, like, I was really skeptical coming into a lot of these things. Like, there's ones that I've bought smaller versions of the figure that people sell. I won't name names always, but like I was like not super satisfied with both the interaction from this person on buying it and what I actually got at the end. They were actually, this is one of those things where it's like I think very high output. They have lots of figures, and there's just like, I don't think that they're actually putting in enough care in each one of those. And they have like some good pours, some that look really good, and then they just sell like basically random like one-offs of it, kind of bubbly on the hands and things like that. And it was like the cheap version of it, and they're selling the same thing for like another like $300 like large version of it. I would have been deeply upset having bought that, and if it would be the same quality or even like in the same realm of quality of like the smaller ones. And I don't know, I wouldn't treat either. Like from my perspective, I think like you should have a maintained quality across all your pieces, right? If you can do it on the large ones and you're selling those, whatever you're selling should be of quality, right? Or at least to your standard.
Go ahead.
Right.
Yes.
My issue with like giving everyone a pass on putting out whatever, flawed to various levels products is what it kind of does is it involuntarily opens a door to people who don't really care about like the medium or like the artistic aspect of like the sculpting, the references, whatever, and they see, oh, there's this community of people who like buy hunks of plastic off each other for $75, $100. I can pour any garbage and then like sell for $75 and be like, if someone's complains, I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be like that. It's the art. It's random. It's bootleg. So you got to be really careful with giving everyone a free pass on errors.
Well, and not just that. It was one thing where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there were only a couple people doing this, making bootleg toys. And when you're one of the first people doing it and one of the only people doing it, it's very easy to say, well, this is what comes out. This is what you get, when you have a person doing it versus a factory. But there's so many people now doing this, hey, we're at a point as a community, as an art form that, the bar has to be raised now. There has to be certain standards and qualities that are elevating this art form. And, everybody in it needs to be doing their part, otherwise, how long does this as an art form last? And can it grow, and can our audience and our buyers and our fans, grow along with it? Because if nobody's putting out, exceptional work, eventually everybody's just going to go away and quit buying, or being interested in collecting what it is we make.
And that's going to be bad for the people that do I hate saying that, do perfect work.
And I think to me, it's also really depends on like which side of the whole scene you're on. Cause there's like, to me, there's like two halves to this, which is like the statuettes and like minis, like individual like art toys themselves. And there is like reproductions of like actual factory models and like actual, like that would be what I would call like actual bootleg, right? And like those bootleg ones, I would expect bootlegs to be like of significantly higher standard. Where if I'm not looking at like some like highly geometric like Safubi thing that somebody's making, that's like basically a whatever kid robot sort of like style thing, right? I would expect some like my standards for quality on those are actually way lower, I think, generally, because I think they are like they're individual and they're unique, like, right, like, I mean, I love like Fret Brett's stuff, right, and those are like wackadoo, right, they're all over the place, and like, but I love that, right, like that's part of the actual quality of it. But if I was buying like a reproduction like Motu figure or something, and it was like that same look and feel as like generally with like Fret, I wouldn't be happy with that, right? But I'm absolutely out 100% stoked on Fret Brett's work, right, like 100% of the time, right?
It sucks to say, but if you go to the Edge Fet, the dude's got gorgeous Boba Fetts for $10. So unfortunately, that has now set the market for anybody else who puts out a Boba Fett. If it's more than $10 and it's not that nice, why then?
Yep.
Because theirs are really nice and $10.
Yeah. Yep.
Low Life Toys, how's it going? Thank you for joining us. You're muted at the moment as well. You're muted.
There you go.
There you go.
How are we?
Hey, bud.
Yeah, good. Yeah, nice to be here. Nice to see you. I figured I'd just kind of let the last chat go through his paces. I had no idea what you guys were talking to until right up at the end there. So, how are you all? Well,
Good.
good.
So basically, we're just kind of talking about is there a good toy, and whether it's subjective or objective. So based on some of the things we've even talked about, oftentimes in a company you do have a chart, right? After you use your Adobe for a little while, they ask you how's the service been, do you want to use a survey, and they always have that nice little like graded system.
Yeah.
Would it become almost too gatekeepery or anything like that for people to almost have that in their own home? Like, I mean, right by your pressure pot, you just have this thing where it's like bubbles, and you have like the quality on the bubbles, and like parting line quality on that. And like the reality is, you pull a cast out and you're looking at it and you're checking off all the -3s or the +3s. Does that really work for toys?
That's interesting. It just depends. I guess if you're selling them, you'd only want the best ones to go through, right? Because there's always going to be duds. But I was also thinking about what makes a toy particularly bad, to think about what makes it good, because you can talk about all the cool things you can have, but it tends to come down to what makes the toy bad. It's almost like the middle line is good, and then there's worse, and then there's extra good, So, but I think being tough on what makes it to the market. I mean, people are buying these things, so sending out crap isn't gonna keep people coming back, and it might sully the whole idea of buying toys that are handmade and stuff,
I would even say it gets tough when I've personally sat with so many artists. You do meet artists, they're like, I've got a box of things I would never sell. And you're like, oh shit. So it gets kind of hard when you're sitting with all these artists who are kind of like, I've got a box of shit I would never let leave. And you've got these other people being like, I started this 2 weeks ago. What do you think? 30,
Yeah.
35? And you're like, shit, man, that probably sucks a lot for that. And the issue is they're like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, I put money into this. And you're like, you should talk to that person over there who's been doing it for 5 to 7 years, who has a box. They'll tell you what to do.
I'm easily like at least $3,000 in the hole. Like that's just everything since I started like 6 years ago. Like just equipment, materials, stuff I've screwed up. Like I've only ever sold one run of things, 8 figures. That's it over 6 years. The rest of it's all a loss.
Yes, but okay, so this is what's important though. I remember this one day you dropped your toy. And there was a whole group of us. We were analyzing the shit out of your toy. How do you feel about that? And right away, somebody was like, I don't think it's got this. Somebody's like, I don't think it's got that many points of articulation. I was like, yes, it does. Started pointing them off, circling them, right? And then they were like, but why have that? And then we were kind of like, well, I don't know, I think it seems sick. You can actually like now do this. And then somebody who I respect a lot, who's been doing toys for 7 years, said, you know what? I've got one from the first run. Yes, there's some things about it that aren't perfect, but everything he's doing just lets me know that the next one's going to be even better. And I'm really excited that I've got one of the first ones, and I hope to get one of the second ones. And so it's one of those things where you're like, you've built a long-lasting customer, whether you've intended to or not, and whether you'll ever recoup any of the costs of it. When Neil Ewing said it's about how you make somebody feel, this person was willing to put their balls out in the middle of a group discussion where everybody was just kind of analyzing it and say, I've fucking got one and I love it and I'm excited about the next one. And that's important because organic word of mouth is important. If somebody's willing to go to bat for your piece like that, then obviously you've got anybody who was kind of debating it going, well, shit, must be really good. Let's take another look here. You know, it's like organic word of mouth is like the best thing you can have.
Well, and Crumbs, you talked about having a checklist as a toy maker, and whether or not you have an actual physical checklist, bullet point of, hey, I hit all the marks. I would say as artists, if we don't at least have some kind of mental checklist, if we're not scrutinizing our own work, then maybe it is a situation where you need to sit down with and look inside and go, hey, do I actually want to be doing what I'm doing? If you don't care so much that you have no interest on how your work's turning out, spotting the spots where you can improve and grow as an artist, then it's kind of like, well, what's the point then? Other than maybe you are one of those people that is maybe making an absolute just cash grab and trying to take advantage of the market.
I think heavy scrutiny of your own work is just part of the course. Is doing anything creative, it's almost like the artistic part of it isn't complete unless you've completely dismantled it in your own head. Especially if you're going to be selling it, it's just part of the process.
The only thing on the checklist should be perfect or nothing.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Well, what's that saying? You only have one chance to make a first impression, right?
Right. I've been working on this one toy for like 2 months and I'm still halfway through the head sculpt because I want it to just be, my checklist is, does it look like something that I would be really happy to buy? And until I get there, I'm really not particularly happy to even think about selling it,
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. Like, is this something that you would buy? And it's funny bringing it up because I don't think like my stuff. I don't think that's stuff that I would buy. Like, it's stuff that I like. It's not that from like not from a quality perspective, but from like for me, like this is why I don't actually care if it sells a lot of the time because I'm actually just like that's something that's like in my head that I'm trying to say and get out, right? And then it's like that's just like part of like the artistic process is like for me. We've talked about this before, and when we talked about branding, there's like this like LARPing aspect to the whole thing, like for some where it's like there's like you play a brand, you play this whole like thing, right? And like so part of doing that is like the actual like performative act of like selling the thing, right? And it's like in reality, like I could make one of these things, but it's like I already made the mold, I already have the thing. Like it doesn't like I can also like the whole from front to back, the whole thing is like to sell, right? That is the objective here. Even if you don't actually care to sell them, right? Which is why it's like I think there is some at least in like the art, the super art, like niche toy, like things like statuette level stuff, right? That's why I have like a lot of play in what I think about, because I think what I see a lot is like things that people actually want like out of their head, like artistically, right? And onto the canvas ostensibly, right? And like that sort of stuff I think has a wider berth of like what I would consider like perfect, right? If it's the image that the artist intended to get through, like to me that's perfect. If it's a bubbly mess that is like clearly just a failed figure pour that they're trying to sell to get through or whatever, like that's less acceptable, right? And I think that's like like I think it's obvious. I think it's one of those things where I think most people who at least have any experience in like analyzing or participating in like not necessarily art markets, but just like art like analysis and digestion generally, like you can pretty easily see when somebody's just kind of grifting versus like actually doing something.
A while back, I forget what the topic was, but I mentioned like tiering and having different price points for things. So like it's it's okay like to have errors, right? And so instead, if you normally want to sell your figure for say $50 or whatever, and this is like in your mind, this is like the pore's perfect, everything's perfect, color's perfect. So like this is like your pinnacle, like this is like what I want it to be. So then like you put those pores at that price, and you're like, oh, these pores have like, it's got some bubbling. This little part here didn't form. Like instead of trying to push it at the same price and just hoping people like are cool with it, just be like, hey, this one's a little off. Here it is for half price, you know, because like it also helps people like maybe take a chance on your thing. They're like, oh, 50 is a little steep. Oh, he's got this one for 25. It's a little flat. I'm gonna get that and check it out. And like sometimes that's like your gateway drug, right? Now you get it and then you love it even more. And you're like, oh, now I want the good one. So, you know, you can use those defects not like to your advantage, but like they don't have to all be garbage, you know, because like Cody had said earlier, there's a lot of, most people are like, you know, there's great and good enough. And most of the time, good enough is where you need to be. Great is, you know, that thing you always strive to hit. So it doesn't mean there's not a market for like your good enough figures and your great figures. You know, they're just different segments of that market.
And
Are you going to be happy later to have that part of what you've done as a brand?
I mean, it just depends on the person.
That's off.
I'd say that, so it came up a little bit earlier about how there's different, like the scene can be divided. And I would say it can be broken down way more categories than that, because part of the issue I would actually say is that right now we're all kind of saying like, well, this should be the standard, or this is what work should be sold at. But one of the things that I've actually noticed the most common about dealing with like artist, toy maker, Instagram is Goblin Mob just used the word business. Is that the reputation that you want for your business? Right? And Suki has often said, if you have a product and you're putting a product out there, whether you like it or not, you've become a business. The issue I would say is suddenly, because everybody's in the same community, and if you look up toys on Instagram and you start following a bunch of other toy makers, you'll discover that there's a bunch of people in the scene that actually the way they look at what they do is, I just started doing it and I really liked it. And I figured, I started posting pictures. People asked me like if I had any for sale, and I was like, oh crap, I guess next time I should make 10. And before you know it, that person doesn't understand that they're actually now entering into a new e-commerce. And unfortunately, in that e-commerce, there are certain standards. Now, if they want to be able to participate, that's great. But unfortunately, the reality is that there are people who are still going to want that piece, and they're not going to understand that that's the difference between an entry level, somebody who's just kind of making as a hobbyist, somebody who's actually making because they want to do this and be able to keep doing it for a while, somebody who's actually looking to do it and build a brand off of it that can consistently support itself off of it. And suddenly it gets broken up into even more categories. And so to try and look at somebody who's like, well, fuck it, man, I'm making what I want. If it sells, it sells. People seem to like it. To try and tell that person, like, dude, get rid of the flashing. Homie, you know, make sure that you don't have bubbles. That person's like, who are you? You white knight. And suddenly you're like...
I think that's more for like, though, the consumer to do. Like as artists, you know, like it's, you know, we set at this like weird place where we have to be kind to one another, not in a way that's like of toxic positivity, but like, you know, to be kind to one another, because we all should like sympathize and try to rationalize like the plight of what we do. And I always feel like it's not for me to tell another artist, hey, dude, like I'm going to solicit advice or unsolicited advice. Like I don't want to go to, you know, and tell another artist what to do.
For your peers, you won't hold a standard for your peers, but you want the consumers, someone who's never touched resin, someone who's entering a scene that has no real allies, because everybody else who buys
that's different though. That's different because you're talking about a virgin consumer.
No, because that's not just a virgin consumer. The reality is even myself, I know one consumer who doesn't make toys. Every other consumer I know makes a toy. So at the end of the day, even if they buy a toy and that toy sucks, they can't say anything because, and even when we sit on the creative discussions, you'd be amazed how sometimes people are very on because we're live and these are going on YouTube. And so people become a little bit censored on themselves. And so the issue is even if they've bought a toy, I said it in that breakdown, it kind of bites when you're the only one voicing. If you ask certain collectors that even are toy makers, what's the scariest thing for you about buying a toy? Having to go in the DMs? Really? The amount of them that are like, yeah, sneaking into a DM and asking about a piece is scary because if they tell me the price is beyond my wage, I feel bad now. I don't really want to be a tire kicker. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not actually going to buy the piece. So it's very intimidating and scary, even for their makers, to slide into a DM, let alone to slide into a DM to be like, yo, I bought your piece and I noticed this, this, and this. The responses I have gotten when I've slid in there are definitely things like, it's a bootleg. What'd you expect? It's the concept. I've gotten into arguments with artists multiple times where to the point now I'm afraid. Like I'll put it right out there. When I see how much Kerfloss is put into his toy, I am literally a bit afraid because I've been told by artists before when I'm like, dude, you needing 3 molds to pull the same 10 figures that person needed 1 mold to pull 30 figures from. I shouldn't be paying for you to learn. And they're like, that's not learning. I didn't know this mold wouldn't last. So I'm sorry, like, that's part of the process. You pay for that. And suddenly you're talking to multiple artists that think that the day they started pouring resin to the day they had a toy all works into that first drop every time. And
I'm talking about, though, as an artist coming from a place of being like, oh, I see this thing. If I bought a fucked up toy and somebody didn't want to haggle with me, I'd talk mad shit. But that's me. I'd be like, this is fucked, but that's me. You know, I just did that last week with the dude who sent me fucked up bubbly toys. I did that with my Hong Kong distributor. Hey, dude, you need to send me fixed vinyl, bro. You know, in the end, that's me as a consumer. As an artist, if I see something, I'm not going to say anything. That's not my place. As a consumer, if I spend money, it's different.
Is it
right?
all across the board? Is it just not your personal best friends, or is it just everyone in general that you won't comment on?
I mean, if you hit me up and you say, hey, dude, how do you get this? I might tell you. But in the end, like, it's not for me to go to a perfect stranger and be like, hey, dude, you know, you should probably not use 325. You know, I think that it comes from like familiarity, you know, like relationships. Like right now, I don't know if you guys think I'm an asshole or not, right? Like, I don't know the situation, you know, I don't know how other people feel. But in like 2 years, our ability to be colleagues or peers is going to change, right? Like, and everybody's journey is different. You know, if you're a consumer, though, you have standards. But, you know, unless it says on your, you know, on your website, hey, this is the way it is, you buy this thing, you know, no refunds, hit me up, though, if it's fucked. You know, you can clip people on PayPal, you know. I mean, if they don't friends and family. You shouldn't, but even then, you shouldn't friends and family bootleg toys, dude. Like,
but, okay, so that enters into a whole new thing again. You'd be amazed. Like, okay, so most people would be like, well, it's not, you shouldn't just be doing that. Neil, you were probably one of the few people who, when I was discussing with you that your website wouldn't get to Canada or whatever, or we were trying to work out a special toy or whatever, you gave me an invoice. You sent me a straight invoice.
I send invoices. I don't do the PayPal shit. I just send invoices.
Straight up. And I'm pretty sure Godmob, you sent me an invoice. Otherwise, like, a lot of the time you'd be amazed that I have to say to somebody, your website won't send to Canada. It just, I literally get to the point where I go through and then also I'm like, oh shit. And then I'll have to slide into your DMs and be like, hey, crap, your website won't. And 99.999% of the time, I give them the information. They tell me a quote for the shipping. Then they give me an email to send it and they say, F and F if you don't mind. And that's just the reality for most of the bootlegging world. There's been times I've heard from someone like, well, I'm basically like a yard sale. I'm not an LLC. And you're like, well, that's pretty fucking expensive for a yard sale piece.
That's a pretty fucked up thing to say too.
It's all to avoid just hitting like that 3% like PayPal fee.
But okay,
like,
so
like it's pretty nominal too.
3%.
Somebody asked me the other day. Somebody quoted me a price the other day and they said, Crumbs, do you actually consider that into the price when you're getting it? I said, yes. That ends up becoming the end pay I pay. So the reality is when you guys say to somebody like, I need to pay F and F or else I get hit, the customer gets that hit. Like, as much as a lot of times, like, you'll talk to an indie company that'll be like, oh yeah, if you don't mind, man, I don't want to take that charge. Do you mind hitting F and F? And you're like, you mean the one that bills me the percentage? No problem. I can do that for you. Oh, on top of that, it's USD. So now my PayPal is going to charge me a conversion fee because it just had to convert it. Not a problem. And so I had to show somebody the other day where it becomes very different when you're buying something that's $100 and the moment you get through the PayPal, it's 150. That's very hard to explain to somebody that you're like, that's great, it's 100, but it's going to be 150 after actually everything else happens.
I'll admit that I use Store Envy. Like, I just have a site. I don't do this, like, message me for a price, because I think about my partner and I go to antique stores and stuff sometimes. Well, we used to, before the world was on fire, and like, you like wander around, and I see this too with like collectible stores and stuff, and nothing has a price on it. I'm just like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Like, I like, because it's like, you go, if there's places where, like, you, especially with antique stores and stuff, where you don't know if they just like don't know what things are worth, or they like are going to square you up when you like come up to the front. So, and they're like, how much do I think you can afford? And so, like, I don't know, I'm like pro just putting your prices up front, and then, like, because then it gives people an idea of where they're at. And I honestly hadn't thought of the conversion crumbs. That's like a good point to bring up. And it's probably just like lack of experience with like selling to like a larger audience. But because at least, like, maybe if something is high and someone wants to message you and say, hey, if I'm gonna buy it in Canada, I'm in the UK, want to do the conversion, it's this much. Like, could you, I'm gonna pay out the butt for shipping, like, could you help me a little bit? Like, that's because then at least gives them an idea of where they're at before they go through the trouble of the cart and getting to the end, and they're less like, great, and just like, close the window.
And since you said it, Crumbs, I am now waiting for somebody to pop up under the name Yard Sale Toys.
Etsy, because somebody actually was asking it. A question came in from Has Been Toys, and he was asking, how do you guys work in shipping? I would say, from my own experience, Etsy is beautiful, because the moment I go on Etsy, it's all Canadian prices for me. So I'm not suddenly sitting there being like, am I going to pay something different when I check out? And then when I pick my payment method, it just goes through. I've literally seen like the real time numbers. Etsy's already done the conversion for me, so PayPal's not charging me a conversion fee. The shipping already gets processed by Etsy before I go through PayPal. Etsy's phenomenal. And when this individual asked if you guys typically put shipping in, I think we can all agree we've seen it before, where the only downside to putting the shipping in is that if somebody buys 2 from you, because I have most definitely been in that spot before, back to how unfortunately you can be privy to things you might not want to know, where someone's like, I have a great idea. I'm going to work $10 of my shipping into the cost of the product, and that way I'm only going to be charging $5 for shipping, 10 international. But then you get 2, and they don't happen to deduct the $10 off the second item, and suddenly you're actually paying this worked in $10 2 times.
So I sold on, some of you guys know, I've said this about 100 times. I sold on Amazon for like 15 years. And I sold books, so they're heavy, and so Crumbs makes a really good point there, because when you buy stuff on Amazon, and you buy from individual sellers, like I didn't do Prime or whatever, so every item has an individual shipping amount on it, right? There's no bundling, there's none of that. So like a practice that I did, and I will carry over into this, because I think Store Envy does the same thing, where I don't think it goes by weight. I think it just is like a per item thing. There might be a stipulation I have to look at, but anyway.
Box too, if it's out of the US.
Okay. So like what I used to do was, if someone bought, 5 books off me and they lived in India, like they would be paying $40 a piece for like, each shipping thing, because it's really expensive to ship there. I would like, it's all going to one package. So then I would figure out what my shipping was, and I would refund them the difference, because I'm like, why? Sure, I could just keep it and make that free money, but it's like it's also unfair to them, and because they don't have an option to like bundle it or whatever. So, you know, being cognizant of like your audience and like other countries and how their costs are affected, and like they're taking a hit because they're outside your country, so they're already paying like a lot for shipping. So like any way you can help them out. It also like the brand thing, you know, it builds that it's trust, right? Like you cared enough to think about their situation and try to like not overcharge them when you easily could. It's just like a gesture of goodwill, I guess, that I think about.
I know I use Big Cartel just because it's like dummy simple setup, and it integrates with Stripe. That's what I like really actually wanted from it. That but like for the actual selling portion of it on the actual site, every product that you actually bring up, like that you're like are actually, you know, every SKU that you develop inside of Big Cartel has like individual shipping prices that you can put for each, and it has the price individually and then the price with others. So like you can have like, it has one price if you just want it, you know, like one of my like carded figures is going to be like $20 or like internationally it'll be $20, right? And then like locally whatever, like $6, right? Because that's like what it costs. But if it's with others, right, internationally it's like $20. With other things internationally it's like, you know, $1 or whatever, right? Because it doesn't actually add anything to it. You can make it whatever, which was pretty interesting. But I honestly like, I work out of the DMs on occasion. Usually if somebody asks me about it and they're trying to buy multiple things or want something, and I'm like, or, you know, want to pay in installments or whatever, and I'll work with people on things like that. And like that, like the Stripe invoicing is like premier for that. You just make an invoice and they can pay with credit card. You don't even have to handle it, and it tells you when they've paid, and then you can ship, do all that stuff. It's an interesting model though, because I know there's a lot of people who like solely work out of DMs. I can't imagine that, and I don't even have like a huge sales volume. Yeah. Like I don't know how like I don't know how big people do it like at all. It's crazy.
It's like for tax season, dude. Like,
what are you gonna do about that?
I mean, as a person, like this is my business. It's like what I do. I mean, I never thought at a point like 15 years ago I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna like do taxes and shit. But like, you know, I mean, that's where like I use Squarespace. I think it's pretty legit. It's problematic at times, but usually that can be solved via talking to your customer. And that's part of, you know, we talk about brand and we're selling an experience to somebody. That's all like really what we're responsible for. But I use Big Cartel. I've never used Etsy, but yeah, it makes me feel bad now that like, you know, about charging shipping and shit. But to friend, I just got fucked over by a dude who lives in Spain for $170. And like he's like, oh, you know, he hit me in the DMs and and like I was like, oh, hey, just send me money. And then he was like, oh, I never got this. And then I sent him money back, like, oh man, you know, I'm responsible to make you feel good. And then he blocked me. So I mean, that's that's why I'm like, hey, don't friends and family, or like work on that level. At least with strangers, if Crumbs was like, oh hey man, you got that Pokemon in purple, I'd be like, oh yeah, I got you, dude. But like fucking $170, that's like huge to me.
Okay. I don't want you to publicly shame anybody, but I do need to talk to you later because I happen to have been, I sent a PayPal 4 figures to a Spanish artist and I never got them, but they blocked me. So I'm really curious what's going on with Spain right now.
That whole Suez Canal thing, is that it? I don't know, dude. Like, you know, people will fuck you over though. That's like kind of just running business, but like
that's true.
That's the only reason. Beyond that, I say don't friends and family people. Maybe literally just friends and family, you're fucking friends and family. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's like literally what it's made for. And you know, I just think to myself, $170, I could have bought a fuckload of cereal, you know.
But I mean,
So
These are like part of it though, you know, like Neil's right. Not doing friends and family, like you have that the merchant shipping, like it's there for a reason. It's there to give you some level of protection. So like, you know, sure you're gonna pay 3% or whatever, but like that's you're paying for that reassurance, I guess, that you have an option. And it's like it's just part of like managing your risk, like he just said.
I don't know. I've done friends and family both ways, and they've always worked out. So I can't say anything else.
That's a sample size though.
And two, though, this is literally the first time I've ever been like fucked over in this way, and you know, that's, and it's been a while, like, you know, so this is the first time. So I'm not saying, you know, you should do your business the way you feel comfortable for sure. But I was just putting it out there.
But that's the other thing that I think that comes up quite often is we have these discussions and we talk about like these burn moments or like the crappy pieces or the ones that make us feel bad experiences. But we also kind of forget too that like it's really easy to focus in on those ones when we're asked to focus in on those ones, but they are one in like every 100, right?
No, probably less than that.
Like, yeah. That's what's also crazy about it. As much as we kind of want to push that bar, it's not as though we're saying like that's what everything coming out is. Like Neil said, that's the first like burn in forever. So it does get kind of tough when you're like, you'd like to kind of say something or make it a known thing, but at the same time too, you're kind of like, you sometimes almost even as a consumer, you almost cut your losses to some degree sometimes because you reached out to the artist doesn't want to try and fix it or make it better. Something that you don't want to be that one dude who's always crying in the scene. Like I was even talking to Mecha Ducky today. I was like, I haven't had a chance, but I really want to crop my eyes and mustache on the Leave Britney Alone and put indie toys in it, because even I understand sometimes there's like this big whiny baby, you know, and you don't want to be that big whiny baby. Even you're kind of looking at yourself in the mirror being like, can you not today? Can you just not today? Yeah. So is there room for shine theory, I wonder, in the scene? That whole idea of like,
be educated.
So shine theory is the whole idea of like, I only shine if you shine, and you only shine if I'm shining. So the whole idea is that you actually always want everybody in your little circle or in your community to be fucking rocking it. Because the moment that they're actually killing it and rocking it, you're killing it and rocking it. And AKA, if somebody in the toy scene, indie toy scene is putting out garbage toys, and suddenly people go, crap, indie toys are garbage. But if everybody's putting out bomb toys, suddenly they start going, dang, I bet everybody's putting out bomb toys. If that guy's putting out bomb toys, he's saying he puts out bomb toys, and he must also put out bomb toys.
So I think there's like, I don't know. I think that cuts both ways really hard, right? And like I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit more spiteful than the average person. Like, but in general, like if somebody's like trying to be in the scene and they're like not putting in the same effort that like I am, like I don't actually care if they succeed or not. I want to see everyone that I like doing well, period, right? Anyone who I think is cool and is doing, I want to see all. I'm not going to hate on anyone for doing well, no matter what they're putting out. If they're doing well, do it. You know what I mean? Like if they're trying and they're doing fucking great in the scene, whatever it is, it's great. Love it. But I also don't think that trying to promote or trying to be on the same level or bring up people who are not as into it or not like trying or being a portion of the scene effectively, I don't think that actually, I think what you do is you sell it outwardly better, but what you end up doing is you harm the scene intrinsically. I think you actually pull down the people participating in that same way, right? Like, so like as much as you are outwardly promoting this guy does such cool stuff, whatever, and it's like maybe it's not that great, or you don't actually like it and you're just trying to like build up everything outwardly, you're actually just denigrating the actual community itself, because you're focusing outward instead of like intrinsically making a cool thing. So
those are some very honest words, man. Like really, that does bring up a good point about like trying to even out the level, because if you have friends that you feel like their work is like surpassed yours or just way better than yours, it's really tough just like trying to push yourself to equalize that level and kind of like be on the same wavelength as them. And that's kind of what goes on with me and my friends and stuff. Like one of us is a better painter, the other one is like superb at casting and all. And your point about, just thinking realistically of like people's performance levels, what they're able to dish out and stuff, and just it bringing down the scene like inadvertently, just on the basis of just pushing or just pulling down someone. Yeah, it is kind of harmful.
And it's hard. I don't think anyone wants to like, but to me, like I am the notes giver. Like in all of like everything that we're doing, I'm the guy that's like, if you show me something, I was like, I'll ask you straight. I'm like, do you want notes or do you want me to just say it's good? Because I can do either one. And I'll tell you, I'm like, I can give note. I'm like, I went to art school. I'm used to critique. Like none of this is like, to me, this is just part of the process that doesn't actually like this doesn't mean I don't like your work. This doesn't mean I don't like what you're doing. I just want to tell you what I think about it and what I think what if I was in your position, what I would want to hear about it, right? I don't need constant praise. I know I'm satisfied with the piece. That's why I'm putting it out there. Like I need you to tell me what you think. I need a different
I want to know what's wrong with it.
Exactly. I not only do I want to, I need to, right? Like I need to know what's wrong with it.
Are you gonna ask a baby what you're doing wrong with your plumbing? Because like sometimes though, like whether you guys are kind of like, this guy always says everything's good. Fuck this guy. Sometimes to a small child, everything is amazing. Everything is wondrous and amazing.
So there's like a distinction.
I look at it, you guys.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
I was just gonna say everything I see that a lot of you guys put out is like it's pretty daunting. It is all from where I'm sitting in the level that I'm at just now with my sculpting and how to work with resin and making molds and stuff. It's like that stuff is way higher standards. I almost feel it's polite to at least try and aim for at least somewhere around there before really kind of pushing into this kind of thing. And no one gets anywhere just having smoke blowing up their ass all day. And I mean I want to improve on what I'm doing, and you guys are full of lots of good knowledge, but it is nice when people say that you don't want to do this. I mean, I don't like the way this turned out. It's beneficial for everyone, and like you say, there'll be better toys in the scene at the end of the day if people all kind of I mean, the more people shine around them, but you need to point out why people are still in the dark, or nobody will have the opportunity to shine with you.
And to that point, I don't think there's like even being critical, or like how I said, like I'm like constant notes giving guy. Like I'm still stoked when somebody's making something, right? I want them to still make it, and I don't want it to be like a part of like I feel like it's like a little dichotic, right? Because I'm excited that you're making something, and I'll tell anyone this. Like I'm really stoked that you're doing something, and I'm really stoked at what you're doing. Like I like all of this. This is what I like, but like these are things that you can work on or should work on.
This will take it to another level.
Yeah. And I think honestly, like, I don't know, in all of my artistic endeavors, like that's what I've wanted out of any, like, especially if I'm showing someone something without like in a non-transactional method, if I'm just showing you something as like a friend or whatever, like that portion is because like, I want, what do you think? What do you think? Like, yeah, man, that's awesome. Okay, cool. Great. Got it. I figured you would think it was awesome. That's why I showed you. What else? Like, tell me, right?
Yeah, I need my mum to tell me the stuff I do is awesome, but I want you guys to tell me what you actually think.
Right.
I think there's like, it's scary, but I think there is a positivity to understanding that really we are competing with one another.
Oh, yeah.
Like in the end, like we are competition to one another. I the idea that team sports is on the other side of the scale to art, in the end, they're kind of similar. And with competition comes ownership and accountability of what you do. Right. And then art is like bringing your ideas to market. But, within the idea of competition, it's like, I want to be the fucking best. I want to do the best I can. I want the people who buy my shit to love me because I love them,
Isn't that more of a personal mission statement rather than competition?
I mean, in the end, it's kind of both, It's like it's like that idea that I don't want to be Batman. I want to be Superman. Batman's all about his shit and how he internalizes things, like, whereas Superman is Clark Kent, really. you know. And
Clark Kent is really Superman.
well, but the idea is Bruce Wayne, Batman. It's a good argument though, right? It's a great argument. But you know, in the end, like, you know, I like the idea of competing with people, you know. I like the idea that like some dudes had beef over a Swamp Thing, like talking about making a Swamp Thing a grip ago and who did it first. This dude or this dude. Turns out I did. And I hadn't been doing it for a grip. And I was like, oh shit, these shits are selling for $70. I'm gonna sell mine for $70. You know, does it mean mine are better or not? I don't know. No, but in the end, it's competition. And I love that shit. I feed off of that shit.
I'll take the other side. I fucking hate competition. I don't like competing for shit. I am like a raw pacifist. I don't like sports. I don't like I like competitive video games because I feel like the stakes are low enough that I don't actually have to care. And you know, I play competitive Magic, but I do it because I like the game. And I just like the point of the game is to win, like all games, right? But in general, I don't like competition. I think especially in the artistic space, it's important that I think we do recognize that we are like all of our like we're all business competition amongst one another's. But for me, like, and I think for a lot of people on the scene, like that aspect of it is like secondary, tertiary even, right? Like I'm part of an art community and I'm an artist within that art community, right? I'm not just like like there's like people like B to the J who like doesn't actually produce works, but like I whatever, like he's cool. He throws down cool pictures all the time, like cool guy, right? And like things like that, like that's participating in that art community, which is like primary. And there's like being an artist within that community, which is like secondary to me, right? Like I think you don't have to make to be a part of the community, right? And then there's like actually selling things and being a business amongst all these people, right? Like all these like competitors. And that to me is like, that's deep down there. I don't like, I see everyone as like competition, yes, innately, because we're all trying to sell things in the same space, but I want everyone to like be making cool stuff if they want to make cool stuff. Like that's what I'm here for. If I never sell another figure, that's fine. If I lose all my sales to somebody else who's doing other art, that's fine. It is what it is. You know what I mean?
So am I the only
have to find a charger I shall return.
Oh, what's up, Goblin?
Am I the only one that never thought of it as competition? I just thought that we all do what we do and it is what it is what it is, and I'm gonna keep on doing what I do. And I just never thought of it as competition. I think it's kind of ridiculous.
No, I mean that's like sort of my point is like to me, like the business aspect of it is so far down that like road. Like I didn't start doing this to like start a business. It is not currently a business. It only loses me money, and that's fine with me. You know, like I think I've said it before. Smooth On's the only one that's making money out of this like transaction generally, right? And like that's right. Like that's fine.
Once it becomes a business, though, it becomes competition.
If
like,
well,
it is like it becomes that. Like this is my life now, bro. If I don't sell my shit, I don't make money. I don't pay my bills, right?
Are you competing with customers or someone else? I mean, you're still gonna.
I'm competing with you, bro. In the end, like, you know, are you making soft vinyl? I'm making soft vinyl. You know, you got something that sells for $20. I got something that sells for $20. You use Maya High Safubi. I use Intercept. You know what I'm saying? I look at that drives what I do. You may think it's ridiculous, but in the end, you know, it is what it is. And that, you know, whatever drives you, it might be personal or, you know, some kind, you know, something important to you, but that's a large part of why I do what I do. But I'm good at what I do. And I understand that. So in the end, like that is part of how and what I do. You know, it in the end, you could look at all of these factors and why we do what we do. And, you know, that leads back into like, what is good, what is bad? You know, I don't think that my customers are like, oh, this dude's a dick because he likes to compete with people. You know, in the end, I love those people. I love y'all because y'all are in this with me, you know, but in the end, it's like, you know.
Well, what does competition have to do with selling something to somebody that they already like? I mean, if you already have a fan base, why are you in competition if they already like your stuff?
Well, the competition aspect of it, I think, is more like individual dollars, right? Individuals with disposable income are in the scene trying to purchase things, right? And you're competing for attention and competing for that like attention in a it's a pretty narrow sense of attention where you're competing for someone's like
In a market.
towards a specific
the dollar
figure,
space.
right?
You want to it's market, and you want a larger piece of the pie, and the larger your pie is, the better. Like that's basic business. Like
yeah, so it's like to me, it's like it depends on if you're like how capitalist do you want your art toy market thing to be. And there's people who make like lots of pop art was informed by like this idea of like capitalism exists and you're competing in a realm where you're selling it to people, right? And like that is okay if that's what you're targeting, right? Like again, like for me, like if I don't sell another figure ever, like that doesn't change what I'm doing, right? But for some people like Neil Ewing is using this as a business and this is like his livelihood, right? Like obviously he's going to approach it with from a mindset where like it needs to generate capital. It needs to actually have the ability to pull dollars from people generally. And if you know that your market has generally any individual customer has $35 a month to spend on like disposable income figures, right? Like you're always in competition for that $35. That's like the point. And it's like if somebody else is making a cooler figure at like that 30 whatever price point, and in the same thing, let's say you're making Swamp Things, but somebody else is coming up with like cool, like I don't know, like Coke and Pepsi fucking styled Swamp Things that are like blowing people's minds for whatever reason because they front paged on Reddit. Like every Coke Swamp Thing, bro. Yeah, right, exactly. And so every Swamp Thing that you would have sold, now somebody else is selling it at the same price point somewhere else, and you did not get that $35.
That Swamp Thing, okay. I've just got to say it. I'm going to be that guy because too many humans I talk to don't own a one-trick pony Swamp Thing. I promise you, he makes the best casts in the game. In the game. Not Swamp Thing, doesn't matter. The best casts. I'm sorry. Like, I have 5 for a reason and 3 on order for a reason. If you want to talk about competing in the market for a piece, it's an $80 piece. I've got 5 on my shelf. I've got 3 in the order. He makes the best figures. Every single figure I get in, I have to compare to that Swamp Thing. The one-trick pony Swamp Things are perfect. If anybody's familiar with that Swamp Thing figure, there's an issue with the shoulder. Every single other one has an issue with the shoulder. There's an issue with the original sculpt. The original sculpt has an issue with the shoulder. His doesn't have an issue with the shoulder. You can feel the very bottom of his arch on his feet. That Swamp Thing is a perfect cast. And the issue is that the amount of people you talk to that think that like this person's just your buddy, but you're like, do you own one? No, I haven't bit the bullet and bought one. And you're like, I promise you, once you get one in hand, it'll change the way you look at toys. You will no longer be able to look at a toy the same way, especially if you got one from the first wave, 50 USD in that first wave. Oh my goodness. Anybody that slept on that first wave, because now that's like a general friggin' bootleg toy is about 50 USD. If you slept on those Swamp Things at 50 USD, dang, because they like, man, they are the best crafted toy I have ever held. I don't know how to put it any other way. Like the magnets are stupid good on it. The weight on it is stupid good. The cast is just like clean. It's stupid. Like,
see now though, don't you want to make dope toys? Aren't you like I'm challenged now to be like, fuck that guy. I want to make dope shit too. That's like my opinion. Jealousy, bro. I'm jealous now. And I'm jealous you love that thing. I want to make that dope thing too, dude. You know, in the end.
That's why I would describe things in this circle more as a friendly sporting rivalries where, you know, we're kind of egging each other on, you know, who can outdo who, you know, in friendly terms, because we all want to see each other do great work, you know, and just do amazing toys versus, you know, when everybody says, you know, competition, to me, that doesn't quite ring true because, you know, what we're all still doing is art, you know, and, you know, everybody's toys, even if we were all making Fets, they would all still be different from one another. So it's kind of like saying, hey, you know, we're in competition in the way that we're all making produce, but, you know, you're making apples, I'm making oranges, you're making celery over there. For the consumers, either they like your art and want your art, in which case the next guy, the next artist isn't even a factor, or they're a collector who has to have every single Fett out there and is going to buy no matter what. So if there is a matter of competition for dollars, I think it's a lot smaller field for, the single collector that is happy to have a Fett and only has money for a Fett. But let's face it, this is also talking art. So, if you have, a level of money to be spending on essentially a luxury, a piece of art, it's, I don't know. So I think it's I look at it more of a friendly rivalry where we're all egging each other on to do bigger and better and greater with each next cast.
I would just say, even personally, like Goblin Mob does reviews of toys. I don't see Goblin Mob as a competition. I see it as more content for me to take in. When I think of Neil Ewing has the bringing a guest in and they talk about doing comic books and toys, I'm not suddenly like, aw, I got to be better than Neil Ewing's live now. I'm like, dope. That's good that there's another live. The reality is, even when I look at somebody like Rainbow Yawn and their unboxings, I'm like, oh, of course Rainbow Yawns are better than mine, but I'm glad there's more content. At some point, you almost kind of acknowledge that it's kind of like, yeah, I'm just glad there's more of this out there. But on the counteract, I did happen to see Rainbow Yawn sitting with toys on tap in a couple weeks, and then it was kind of like, well, I know which one I've got to edit real fucking quick, because I don't really want to be yesterday's news after he's already sat with toys on tap and done a full 45 minutes or whatever with him. And it's kind of like, no. So there is a fine line, right? Nobody wants to be like the second person to do the Boba Fett.
I think for millennia, the institution has told us that we're artists and it's okay for artists to be poor. I hate that idea. I did that shit forever. And then I worked a corporate job for a decade, and I sat there dealing with uppity ass white people that made fucking 10 times what I did, that hated me, and in the end, we shouldn't have to be poor. Competition, it is what it is. I mean, I don't, hate people in the scene. There are certain people that are like villains, but, in the end, we kind of know, I hope we all know those people. What's up? But I don't want people to think that it's like a negative thing. I mean, feel how you do about it. I mean, but we all do this for different reasons. But we all shouldn't be poor if we're pouring, $3-4 grand, 10 grand into doing this. I really want y'all to succeed.
So to me, there's like that. Part of it is like, it's not about being poor and not being poor. It's like, does a market exist for like my toys? It's like, ostensibly yes, but it's small, right? And I know that, and I'm like not selling out thousands of dollars worth of toys every day, right? Like, so I can do this. I can recoup some cost from selling it because people do want them, right? But like I'm not out trying to make it a business, right? It's not a livelihood aspect. It is a sustainability thing. This is like people, like if you're big into like Warhammer, lots of people will like paint other Warhammer, like sell painted figures or sell painting as a service, right? Or like Magic cards, lots of people do like Magic finance level stuff where you're like buying and selling on speculation in order to support your hobby, right? And like to me, this supports like selling simply is a matter of like supporting my hobby and my art, like on top of like I talked about earlier, like the LARP brand aspect, which is fun. But like in general, it exists to be like within the cycle. Any money I put into this I don't expect to get money back out. I just expect to be able to reuse those funds at least once or twice more, right?
Okay,
and
but
so like
that expectation though, I would say any hobby, the expectation needs, like, unfortunately, is I'm only going to spend money. When I signed up for soccer, it was never I'm going to be in FIFA. It was I love soccer. I'm going to pay some money to play some soccer, and I get the experience of playing soccer.
So I think that the difference here is like you could, like in this aspect, like you could also approach soccer with the idea of I'm going to be pro. I'm going to go pro. I'm going to play at the world stage, and you're going to start with that, like that in mind, right? And then similarly, like you could start like I'm going to start making. I'm going to like I've seen people on here. I've talked to them all the time. There's a couple people on here who have started their whole journey with like marketing a figure that they don't have in hand yet, period. Right. It is literally a sculpt that they've done that is off at a vinyl factory somewhere that they have no idea. And they're literally marketing a figure, marketing an entire product line, marketing themselves with art that doesn't exist yet, because the intent is to immediately jump into the business end and start selling things like as soon as it drops and being like a part of this. Right. And I think it's about creating that business portion in the immediate term.
I think though, if you look at the Safubi market, soft vinyl, that's the totally the wrong way to go about making or being a part of the scene, because it's important that like if you're going to sell toys in the scene, you should buy from other people too. You should be an active participant within this market in order to get in on the market. Like you see so many people are like, oh, I want to make soft vinyl. And it's like, fuck you, dude. Spend 7 years and then make soft vinyl.
Yeah. I mean, but I don't really agree with that. Like that gatekeeping though. I think like,
it's not gatekeeping, dude. It's like, it's complex. And it's like, why, it's my Muck Marshman took $7,000 to make, bro. If you like,
you can't like run it as a business and expect everyone else who is in it to also be buying and selling. Like you can't, there aren't enough. You have to have more customers than like to make it a sustainable business. Like for you to live on your sales, there's no way every customer is someone who's like in the fucking community. It's just not possible.
It's important though. And too, like if somebody is not making toys and they come into a situation and say, oh, this dude is like 2 months into this shit and he says, oh, hey, what's your factory? I'm not going to give it to him. Sure. Like, no way. Like that's not happening. Is it gatekeep? Is it negative? Not really, dude, but I mean, but see, that's the deal. You're not making
figures. You're sending them to a factory to be made. Like, let's be clear.
I mean, in a way, but not in a way.
I mean,
I engineered it. I jointed it.
Sure.
I understood. I spent 6 years making the thing.
I don't have any issues with like soft vinyl as a production process. I think it's a very interesting thing. I've looked into it for some of my other figures, right? Like I think it's a cool thing to do. I think that like not telling someone your factory simply because they haven't like been in the game long enough, like that all that is doing is you're actually just withholding the means of like creating art. Like if you truly think that it's an art piece and you want, like, I'm not going to tell people not where to buy paint.
It's like pay your dues, right? It's like learn your process.
I've worked in commercial art,
bro.
I've worked in commercial art. I've worked in
shit. What I don't
it is what it is.
Because then all of a sudden your consumers are completely removed from the cost differences between Mexican vinyl, Brazilian vinyl, Japanese vinyl, Chinese vinyl, American vinyl, and we're completely removed from the unit costs of these. That's none of your business though. It does in the end of our business.
Oh, I got a question.
That's unfortunately that's part of my business because I'm not just a consumer. Part of my business is digging into these things and finding out what the heck's going on. And it does become part of my business when somebody doesn't want to talk about whether they go to Lulu Bell or whether they.
Bro, I went through Skull Brain for years, dude, before I got a factory.
All this is on Reddit too. Like you can spend 5 minutes on Reddit, or most of these people will take a picture of their own vinyl and they'll actually cite who makes their vinyl. It takes like 5 minutes to be able to see.
Yeah, but there's a difference. You could go to Science Patrols and he's not going to listen to you unless you have a reference.
And that's cool, but why then avoid?
You can go to Mile High Safubi and you're going to get set on a line.
Then why be the person to avoid giving it to them? If it's going to be up to the other person to make the final call, that's the thing I find kind of odd. Like
because it deals with empathy. It deals with an idea that like, why would you saddle somebody, make a decision? It's not everybody. Like if I see somebody that's grinding and they're working really hard and they ask me, I'll help them. I'll do consult for them.
But why does it matter? Like, to
But
me,
I'm not
like,
gonna
if somebody,
go to a, because I don't want that on my heart, dude. Don't want somebody to spend $4,000 on something that's not gonna turn out.
it's
You know,
no, but that's somebody's, like, if somebody asks me where like what resin do I use, like, why wouldn't I tell them, oh, I use 325 and these are the pigments that I use, and like I use 16, right? I use like Moldstar 16. That's what I use, because this is what gives me these results, right? X, Y, and Z. And like,
Well,
part of that to me is like, I've acquired that knowledge absolutely for free from other people or the internet. 100%. That is free information that exists that I have just acquired over time, and now I'm just a repository of it. And to me, I don't know, to me, the responsibility of holding that, and again, I've worked in commercial art, I've worked with people who also say you have to pay your dues to get access to things, and I just fully disagree. I think paying your dues is something that people invent in order
Yeah.
to keep other people
It's
out of
kind
their
of like
space.
Uber
it's
Project.
it's like pound time, dude. Figure out what works for you. Get your
Or you-
process down. My process.
But like,
not
what is the
your
process? Like, I have an iPad with the fucking sculpting app, and like I can sculpt up a thing in like a ZBrush equivalent in 10 fucking minutes. Why can't I send that to a factory?
That's not how that works, bro.
It 100%. It 100%.
No, it isn't, dude.
Man,
That's
there
not
are
how
people
that
out there
works.
that, yeah.
150% is. It 100%.
No, man, because your joints are gonna have some shit like Creature Maker toys put out where the joints are all fucked
It doesn't.
up,
But it.
and you
hold on,
don't
hold on.
understand that process. That
But that
process
doesn't-
is you
no.
paying your dues.
No.
Figure it out, do
Oh.
the work,
No.
be
None of
nice,
that.
and that's it.
Hold on. None of that actually matters, because the raw thing that I asked
Bro,
for
you
was
don't
what
do it. You don't know.
Hold on. No. The raw thing I asked you for was what factory can I send this to? And what you're doing is you're making a value statement about what I'm actually doing. Like,
If I was like, hey, bro, give me a finder's fee of $1,000.
I'll just search for it on Google. Then it doesn't matter. It's like, it's not worth asking you if you're going to charge me $1,000.
Bro, you don't know. You're just talking
No.
out your ass on some bullshit about
I'm
shit
not.
you don't know.
No. I'm not. Hold on.
Wait, I got a
Hold on.
question. So
Can
I've
I-
only,
can
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but it's on the tip of my tongue right now.
Okay.
If I can be, what if I'm a professional like 3D artist? Like, and I've never sold the thing. I've never been in a video game. I've never done any sort of VFX work, and I want to make a toy, and I have a sculpt. You don't even know what it is. I don't even have an Instagram. And I fucking ask you, what factory can I send it to? How can you possibly say I haven't been grinding? How can you possibly know what level of effort that I put into it? And you on your own are making an absolute value statement about who you think I am before handing me the keys to your production, because you do
It's
not
not
want me,
a value
because you
statement
don't-
on who
no,
I
it-
think
no,
you
hold on,
are, bro.
Hold on.
It's that, like, you have these like ethical despondencies about like what I do with my information,
Bro, if
versus
you're a
what you
painter-
feel like, bro.
No. If you're a painter and you buy all your fucking paints from Dick Blix, and then someone goes, those paints are amazing, I love that color there, and where'd you get it? And you're like, oh man, I don't know if I want to tell you, because I don't think you're really a painter. It's like, no, you went to Blix, bro. You went to Blix. It's not a
Bro,
crazy-
if you sent me a dope ass sculpt
Why do
and
I
it was
think I
dope and the joints look good, and I could tell that you had
What if there's
within
no
the
joints?
art. What's up?
What if there's
I
no
tell you,
joints?
put some joints on it, bro.
Why? What if it's a non-articulated statuette? Why does it have to be?
Because it's gonna need joints in order to go through that process of being number one slush cast and number two pulled out of a specific mold. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That's why. Why does it need joints, bro? You don't understand, bro. You don't understand the process.
There's no such thing as a non-articulated vinyl figure.
It's just going to get popped out the bottom. You can have one, but I would tell you, if you in certain parts.
So you've
this
made a
one would be
values
full.
judgment at this point because it
dude.
exists. It exists.
You
Of
don't know the
non-articulated
process, though, bro.
I'm holding one in my hand, man. Like,
let me see it.
Look, every fucking kid robot, oh, look at that non-articulated soft vinyl figure.
Bro, that's not Safubi, though. That's put into a rotocast oven in China.
What is a slush cast? But it's a roto. They're the same.
No, it's not. It's not.
Safubi's a buzzword.
No, it's not. It's a specific way of making vinyl.
No, it's a slush class.
It's specific.
Product.
That's rotocast in an oven with a little bit of vinyl put in, and it kicks around in an oven that sends it up
And
in
so,
a
can
rotocaster.
you describe slush casting?
Slush casting is when you take and you fill a nickel plated mold entirely with vinyl. You heat it up. It'll cook just a little bit, right? This is post it being either truncated to push the molds out via gravity, pressurized in a tank. It's not rotocast. It doesn't, it's slush cast. There's a difference within that production process.
Okay.
So you get like a solid piece with a little hole in it. That's oven cast. That's more like what they do in Mexico and China in big factories. Sofubi is like what DuPont created in the 30s and 40s to make dolls. And then it was put into Japan.
And so none of these factories would send our sculpts back to us and say, here's what we recommend.
They would charge you. Like they would be like, oh, hey, you need to
isn't that on
give
us?
us $2,000.
Isn't that on us?
Yeah, for sure.
So what I'm saying is still completely relevant here, which is you're 100% making a value judgment on somebody else's work and effort and ideas. And then gatekeeping your knowledge based on that.
But
100%.
If I am, like if say you sent me something and I was like, man, this is fucked, it's not going to pull.
Why am I sending you? I just want to know who makes your shit. I'm not like, you don't even have to know who I am. I can just be like, hey, what factory do you use? Okay.
I mean, to go back to paying dues, what I wanted to ask before is next month I'm going to be doing this for 2 years, and I've finally gotten to Sofubi. I thought it was a long time. So what I go back and do is have resin for 3 more years to earn the Sofubi. So is that what I should do?
I mean, for you it was 2. For me it was 6.
For somebody else, it could be start there. Why does it?
In order to earn my keep.
I mean, I'm not saying, you chose to go through, who you did. It wasn't on me to provide you that information. You could get it from somebody else. I have a particular view on what I do. It doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong.
You giving information, that's you saying that you have to pay your dues before you get into this.
I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should pay your dues if you want to ask me. You could get it. Like,
why are you the gatekeeper? That's what gatekeeping is. That's what I'm saying. Is like,
I mean, in the end, you could get butthurt because I feel a certain way or not.
No, nobody's butthurt here. I'm just wondering. It's a weird position to take, I think, especially in an artist community, to deny somebody information because they haven't paid their dues. And again, I've worked in commercial art. I've worked with people who are professional artists. Yeah, right. And so when people are like that, those are who I would call toxic people who I don't want to fucking work with because they're not actually giving me any sort of help. Like the point
I think there's a myth that I should help you.
Why shouldn't you help me if we're all trying to make cool shit? If we're all trying to make cool shit and better ourselves and better our work, like that's the point of the community aspect of it. That's the point of actually coming together as a group of people to discuss these things. If you don't want to help, don't participate in the community. Don't, because if you're not willing to help and you're participating in the community, what you're doing then is you're actually using the community for your own means. You're using it as a promotional tool. You're getting other.
If you knew me though, you would know that that's not my steez.
I don't. You
have this like opinion.
No. Well, okay, but like, I don't
want to make this shit about me, bro, because you're mad about shit that I said.
I'm not mad about anything. What I'm saying,
helping someone out. That's all it is.
I mean, but in the end, somebody wants to make something and it costs $5,000.
Let them spend $5,000. What if I have a fucking $1 million in the bank? Why can't I just fucking spend $5,000?
Do you have like when somebody hits me up and they say, "Hey, consult on this toy. Do you have a budget?" If they say no, it doesn't. I'm like, man, just come back when you have a budget. Ain't.
What if I've worked in software now for over a decade. I have plenty of money in the fucking bank. What if I want to actually just make a toy? What if I literally have enough money? I don't care about budget. I actually just want to say, I just want to make a toy. I don't care what it costs. Why is it up to you? Like, I understand if you don't want to, but what I'm trying to investigate here is why do you feel like it is your position to gatekeep that information when it is literally Googleable? It's one search away. It's not.
It's not up to me, bro. As far as like,
you make it up to you when you say I'm not going to give it to you because I don't think you've paid your dues. That's what I'm saying.
But that in the end, you like you said, you have the ability to do what you want with your time.
Which is why I chose to ask you out of respect, maybe, right? Like maybe I.
But number one, I don't know you. You're just some rando asking me a question. Like, no offense, but in that specific, like, if you were to email me and ask me, I'd be like, I
answer random questions all the time from people, so like that's.
Yeah, but I mean, I do too.
I'm going to kind of try and gear it a little bit, only because Jackie Carter Artist actually brought up in the YouTube chat, and I kind of want to kind of bring it into the chat, only because I think this can actually kind of help the conversation. So one of the things that they ended up asking was, is there a time that giving that information might actually negatively impact your own reputation? And I would actually kind of be curious to know that, because a lot of these communities are so tight knit that I'd be curious to know in the soft vinyl community, if you all of a sudden had one of your friends like Paul at Mile High saying, why the hell did you send so-and-so my way? Does that now start reflecting badly on you for sending these people to the manufacturers? I wonder.
In the business, that doesn't seem like a bad thing.
That seems, yeah, that's like Mile High's Fubi's like job is to filter out people they don't want to work with, right?
Yeah. That's up to him.
I think generally, to me, I think the whole point of a community is to share information. And if if you're not willing to share information between the community, if you're not willing to share these things, like what you're doing is you are protecting what you think is your position within that community in order to, like, that's the whole point of withholding that, right?
It's not wrong to protect your own self-interest in certain ways, dude.
I'm not saying it is. What I'm saying is that I think it's it's an anti-community. It's not communal, right? So like that's the thing. And like that, I think you can make a judgment on, right? You can make a value judgment on that if you'd believe, like, but I think generally, if you're in a community, like, again, I'm not going to not tell you where to buy paint and brushes and it's not my place.
For people like me, I'm just starting out in this community. One of the big reasons I'm still here, still making toys and getting more and more excited about it, is how much feedback and just openness that there's been in the community. You know, I could have seen this as a really dangerous place to even try and attempt to associate with people if it was straight off the bat, that kind of stuff. And one of the only reasons I'm definitely still doing it is because it just seems like something worth doing to share with all these people who have been nice enough to share with me, you know. The idea that I'll get to a certain point, and if I haven't become great enough at what I do, I don't get to know any other of the cool secrets and stuff, it would turn people away from doing this for sure.
Well, like we have an issue in the US, because I know some of you guys don't live in the US, where like there's like talk about, you know, like reducing the cost of college and medical care and stuff, and we have these arguments from people that are like, I had to work for blah blah, I had to pay my dues, so like basically that translates to I had to suffer, so I think other people should have to suffer to get to the same level, and that's bullshit.
Yep. Because you can come into it day one and be ready to go, but you being denied access to that is what's the only thing that's stopping you, right?
You know,
I'm curious, at what point is it that it's not yours to give? Because a lot of times, let's face it, like somebody might have told you something, but they might have even said, like, if you don't mind, man, like I know you're killing it, you're on your grind, I'm down to share this, but between you and I, this is what I do. Is that now your information? Now that it's been provided to you, is that now your information to be able to pass along to others? Or do you have to kind of respect that artist or that other crafter came to you and said, between you and I, this is what I do?
They're asking you to participate in withholding information.
I want to go back to the whole referencing a person and how that would backfire. Like, I really think that does happen from time to time, that we do have people in the community who kind of like cause a negative reputation for themselves. And I do believe in sharing the knowledge. However, let's say theoretically, like, I want to bring this argument in here and see what you guys think, because I'm really like just having trouble trying to process it myself. Now, what if said person's like, hey, I'm going to go to this factory. Thanks for the reference. Now I'm going to tell this factory that you sent me here without, you know, telling them that you sent me here. And basically saying, yeah, he said I'm a good guy. So like, what do you guys feel about that? Because then if that guy actually stirs up trouble, like, you know, if it's even not his fault, how does that fall upon you?
I don't think it does. Like in a business context, like it's a business. This is a factory who's looking for prospects, right? If you're coming to them with a mold, with a thing, right? Like if you can send people, like I don't know what factory would turn away having people know about them. You know what I mean? Like they want business, and then their job is literally to filter out clients, like any other business, right?
Okay.
They don't care if you're going to spend fucking 10 grand making a toy that is pointless, right? Like they don't. I wouldn't, right? It's like you're gonna take it if it's worth your time, if it's worth
I
your
mean,
money as a factor.
I've posted stuff on LinkedIn because I turned like an old page into a company page, and like I'll post it and I'll get like DM'd, commented by like Chinese manufacturers that are like, "Do you want us to make toy?" I'm not that's a little racist. I can say that, but like but it's like some rep from that company, some employees like, "Hey, we're a manufacturing facility. Clearly, you want to make stuff like this. We can do that. Like, send me your stuff." So like, I don't think it's some like barrier to find a company. It's just a budget. Like if you have the money or you don't. And like, I mean, Neil's right. Like I posted a while back that WonderCon at home thing, and it was like all these indie manufacturers that included Super 7, IM Elemental, and some others. So they're like maybe kind of at the level Neil is, where like they, it's all professionally manufactured. And they talk about this, the back and forth you go through with companies, like, the joint fit, engineering issues, but that's going to happen on every product because like, it's just the iteration, unless you've been doing it for forever, where like, exactly how their process works. So you can, adjust your designs to like fit their process. But like, it's really just money and time. It's not like some magic thing.
Yeah, but I was thinking like, what we talked about bad customers before. And what if this factory is like, let's say theoretically, X person's like, hey, this mold came out bad. Will you fix it? And the company is like, all right. And then they come back again and they're like, yeah, it's still bad. And they just repeat the process, kind of like ruin that rep. And then, hey, so-and-so recommended me, remember? And then you just kind of get lumped in there.
I mean, they're paying for those iterations, though. They're not going to retool it for free.
Oh, okay. But
yeah, that's one of the really devastating things about soft vinyl, at least going through Japan, is they'll just charge you if it's fucked. If you go through China, it's a little bit different, but I mean, I feel like a dick, and I'm sorry, you guys. I don't want to feel like a dick.
I don't even
be a dick.
I don't even think you're being a dick.
I had this situation where I gave a dude information, and he did this huge toy project. And it was during pandemic, and I don't really know him, but I got caught in the middle between my factory and this guy, and he pushed like a bunch of huge 9-piece toys, and it ended up costing him about $14,000 on top of like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of shipping. And I was a consult on it. It didn't work out well. And he didn't move a lot of these things. For me, I don't want people to be in situations where they don't sell things that I want people to flourish. I want them to have like certain information before they get into stuff. And I don't always turn people away from information. But I do at some points make judgment things about whether or not in my mind they should do that or not. And if that's dickish, I don't know. I feel better not, with what I understand, to like be like, hey man, give it a couple years, come back. I
mean, that's like your story is like some of what you were saying. Like that's some like PTSD level shit where like you were trying to help someone, it blew up, and somehow you like took the blame for it. Like it can like makes people hesitant to want to like, get involved again.
If I tend to on the defense of like Neil's viewpoint of that, Slugger Toys has even said to me, when he first came out with a sculpt and he was looking to get a toy made, it was a good thing that the soft vinyl community gate kept him, because they actually did let him know this sculpt ain't gonna fly, homie. And the longer he started submersing himself in it and educating himself, all of a sudden he realized, oh shit, this is what I need to make changes in order to have a product that comes back good. Am I saying that it needs to be for everybody? No. But to be fair, like that's a prime example where I've sat with an artist and they've explained to me how devastational it probably could have been if nobody had actually said to them, your sculpt isn't going to work.
Another example of why critique is good,
Yeah, I think earlier I think Neil had the right heart and just worded it wrong. It's just all about knowledge of like getting to know like what you're doing, what you're getting yourself into, and just if you just go in there blindly with all hope, you get yourself into like a bunch of tragic situations that you weren't really prepared for, and then you get turned off by the scene because of a bad experience. I feel like maybe Neil earlier just kind of worded it wrong because like when he was like scoping people out, seeing what they did beforehand, maybe he wanted to see if they knew enough of what they were doing. I think that's what he was saying, and it just came off the wrong way.
Would you
But-
let somebody get in a race car if they've never driven a car before?
Exactly, yeah.
If you go to any
It
racetrack
would
in
be
the
nice to
country,
know
if
where
you go
to
to
go to
any,
buy a good race car and to talk to someone about how to
Sure.
get into good race car driving. You don't want to keep that information back.
Right.
I don't want people to feel like shit, like in the end. I'm just not good with people. Like, but
Most
So
of
if I came straight to you right now
But
and asked
now-
you to put me in touch with a supplier or a factory in Japan or China to make something I've done, knowing the stuff that I've done so far, you'd know that I'm nowhere near the level where that would be a particularly great idea,
I just
but
say,
it's
hey
nice
man,
to
pitch
know
me
that
something.
there's the context there if need be.
Well, there's like a
Having the details of a company is very much a lot more different than recommending somebody to them and trying to make that kind of thing work together.
yeah, I don't know where you become like the Shark Tank in the middle of it, and you need to be pitched like someone's figure to get.
I mean
know,
that in a
but
way
then-
of like, hey, is this gonna work? Let me see it. Let me talk to you about it. Like,
Right, but then-
not in a way of.
But to me,
I
so like
am-
that's the thing. Is like, why wouldn't I tell you where I bought my paints? Like, you probably can't paint, but like you talking to somebody at a factory, you talking to like, I learned a lot talking with Mile High Sfubi about like what it looks like to actually get one done. And it took me talking to Crumbs to even figure out that was a dude who manufactured this. Like, I had not actually even seen this, right? Like that information is, I mean, and it's a company, it's a public entity that exists, like that presumably wants to be known, right? So to me, it's like, it's one of those things like, yeah, you can let people spend the money that they have on those things if they're, I understand fully. Again, like I said, I'm the notes giver. If I think that it's not going to work for you and I understand why it wouldn't, like I will tell you, but like, I don't think generally guarding information because of like, for really any reason, especially if it came to you for free and if it's the knowledge of a public entity, like
It didn't though. Like that information didn't come to
you.
me
You
for
paid
free.
someone to know who your factory is.
I spent like, before even China was doing slush cast molds, which started with Red Hot Style and then went to some other companies. Japan was the only place to get slush cast stuff. And you could go through certain places in Mexico, but the vinyl would come out weird. I spent a lot of time on Skullbrain, getting just like bashed by those dudes. And finally I spoke with Science Patrols for years and got on a list and waited, and I threw toy shows. I bought a lot of work. I consider that all like be a part of the community, do your stuff, make toys. That's essentially paying your dues.
All I hear is I was abused and I want other people to be abused.
It's not a me projecting
Come on, man.
trauma thing, dude.
Bad talk on
I've been to therapy. I know what the fuck that is. Don't be mean, bro.
I'm not being mean.
Yeah, that's mean.
No, that's the like, I mean, I'm not gonna throw Aaron under the bus, but it's the same thing where it's like whenever I hear paying dues, all I hear is like I hurt and I struggled to get here, and I think other people need to struggle to get where I'm at as well.
I just worked a lot, bro. I just put in work.
I think we're just kind of straying.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
I just feel like we oversimplified that question and we're just like when we're throwing our pitches and stuff, it's just coming out the wrong way. Like when we talk about sharing information and stuff, that kind of comes with the obvious, oh yeah, here's how you use it, or works best with this and stuff. It's not a plain, I'm not telling you shit just because you haven't learned it. That's like a whole different like interpretation of that. I think when we were talking about that, we were being in a lot more friendlier terms. And what I think Cody said earlier about where does the whole Shark Tank thing come in? It's like, again, we're missing the whole message here. It's like, are we, how do you say it?
We aren't and we aren't, because if you think about it for a second, like the whole conversation today was actually what makes a good toy or a bad toy, and subjective versus objective. And anybody who showed up here today put themselves in the position of being a Shark Tank, really. You basically decided like, hey, this is a toy community I know and love, and this is the standard that I think other toys should be on, because this is where I hold myself and where I hold myself accountable, and that's what I'd like to see from others in the community. So technically, even just by like voicing what we think is like makes a good toy versus a bad toy versus whether there should be set standards, we've all technically kind of already decided to show up here with already implied gatekeeping intent, really. Like,
oh, but you know me, Crumbs. I came here to say there's no such thing as standards, and they're all fucking invented, right? Like that's the reality. Like I don't believe that like anyone's objective opinion of any of this or anyone's subjective opinion of any of this is worth anything, right? I don't think mine is. I don't think yours is. I don't think anyone's here is worth it.
Yeah.
That's why I think generally that's why I do believe, like, I don't think that any single one of us has the ability, or any single person ever, really, and especially if we live in America and we live in a capitalist society that allows us to spend our money as we want, that anyone has any room to actually tell us not to do something because we want to do it if we have the funds to actually fund it, right? And like, especially if that comes down to just like not sharing something. And I'm not trying to, Neil, I'm not trying to harp on you or whatever. This is, I'm just having fun with this conversation at this point. I'm not trying to be a dick or anything. I think this is an interesting thing to actually hit on. And it's just generally, people want to do things. People have ideas in their head, and denying anyone, like if you came upon that information, no matter how much it took, like, I mean, I'm a software engineer. I sit in front of a computer for literally like tens of thousands of hours at this point, learning that craft since I was like 13 years old. And like, I sit on Stack Overflow and I answer questions for like people who have opened up like a fucking IDE to write JavaScript for the first time ever. Like that, it's like, why do I do that? Because somebody did that for me when I, 15, 16 years ago, right? That's the whole point. And like, to me, like removing or making that grind easier for someone only accentuates what the community is possible of doing, right? It only brings up new minds that have new ideas that allow the community to flourish. And if you, in not doing that, actually is that's how you kill a community. If you're sitting there and holding down information, this is like punk scene shit, where it's like, you don't want to give somebody your tech, you don't want to tell people how you're doing things, you don't want to let people hear what you're doing, because you want to protect your position in the scene. And I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying generally, like, this is where a lot of that mentality comes from. So when I hear people say, I don't want to actually give out information or something because I want them to make good decisions, like, I don't think anyone's in a position to actually know what potential somebody has that you're denying if you're not being just another beacon, another portion of this journey that everyone's on. All this information that everyone's gathering from forums or whatever, if you've happened to do the work, that's awesome that you did the work. Now, like, I think your job, your moral responsibility after doing that work is to then make it easier for other people to do the same work. Like, that is like progress at a human level.
Like removing obstacles instead of creating them.
Yes, 100%.
Well, like that's why I'm very like open about everything. I get messages all the time. Well, not all the time, but enough about like, well, how'd you do this, that, whatever. And I write fucking paragraphs of like answers. And so like my logic behind it is like we talked about this before, like, they're just tools, right? Every painter teaches other painters how to paint. Like, I'm interested in like you, the general you, like your ideas. Like, if I can help you improve your ability to produce the thing in your brain, I want to see the thing in your brain. I don't care about how you got there. Like, because that's what makes each of us different, is the ideas that we're putting out there on the market into the community. Like, everything else are just tools. And like, the easier those tools are to access, and the more we can like help someone. I've been doing this for 7-8 years, and like, I made tons of mistakes. So I'm like, I try not to be like, we're talking about unsolicited advice, and I try not to do that, because I don't want to come off as like, this is the way, But if you ask me, oh, I have a problem, or I like this thing you did, or whatever, like, how did you solve this? Like, I'll tell you, because it might help you where I struggled. And you know, I've been alive a long time, and barriers suck. And the more of those I can pull out of the way for other people, that, because like I fucked up half my life, I'm trying to fix it. So like, if I can help someone not do the same things that I did wrong, because I don't have kids, so I'm like, I need to impart that knowledge to other people instead. So that's kind
And
of
they're
how
expensive mistakes too, right? Working with resin and working with silicone, they're not cheap mistakes to make.
Well, personally, like, I think we always have to keep in mind too. Somebody even asked me the other day, like, Crumbs, man, I haven't seen you posting the bots in a while. And I was like, yeah, that's because I'm at the painting stage now, and I'm really in my fucking head about it. So the reality is, sometimes when we're withholding information, it's also because of our own insecurities sometimes too, right? It's not because we actually are saying like, nobody needs to know what paints I use or how to do my paints. Sometimes we're sitting there going, I hope nobody makes fun of me for having to go with these paints. I hope nobody actually criticizes me for having to use this masking tape. So sometimes it is like, as much as you mentioned, like, you don't care how we got there, you care about the finished product. Right now we're seeing more and more and more that process videos are actually what are really catching people's attention. And I noticed the other day, actually, I'm going to say it, One Trick Pony made one and he had that fucking blade. And right away I was like, I hope people fucking screenshot that. I've been trying to explain that fucking blade for months without telling you exactly what it is.
Exactly.
It wasn't mine to give. It was not mine to give. And I was like, I've been trying to explain to people like a spoon carving knife. I've been trying to explain to them a kiwi tie blade. Like, it wasn't mine. I was like, I hope that they see that and they fucking take that thing. But it wasn't mine to give. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the guy who's never used that knife to then start telling people like, oh, you should curve a blade. And actually, who am I to make that call for anybody without ever having touched that thing in my hand, without ever having used it? But the moment he showed me it, like way back right away, I was like, oh, waterproof material. When you think of how a waterproof backpack or jacket is sewn, right away, you could tell that that's the way it was going to be creating this fold in the silicone. And you're like, well, dang, man.
You can still tell people where you found that information without passing it off as your own, you know? You could say, hey, I saw this cool thing in a video, you should go check it out.
You'd be amazed how many artists are actually like, hey, man, I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't really know if I should have mentioned this because, like, I don't really know if it's normal and everybody does that. And something you're like, what a problem. I'll take that out, man. You didn't want that in there, or you said it's between you and I, like, that gets removed. But then I'll admit, like, there's been times I get elated when I see it pop up because now I can share it, right? The moment I even told him yesterday when I saw that, he was like, well, it's out there now. It's out of the toolkit. And you're like, damn right it is. I'm going to talk about every chance I get. When I saw downer.energy actually put the magnets in the mold before making the figure, right away I was like, yes, somebody finally posted about drilling the cavities and putting the monster clay and then making the negative out of the friggin' magnet. Like, thank you. Because I can't say anything if somebody says, don't say anything. That's not my
credit where it's due.
But then when you see them come out, you are kind of like, and you're excited because somebody else has the confidence to kind of be like, oh, fuck it, man, I'm doing what I'm doing. And like, maybe it'll work for somebody. And you're like, thank you. But the reality is, for somebody else, they were too insecure. So they might not have said it.
Yeah.
That
like
scares the shit out of me. Like, he scares the crap out of me. If I'm painting and Mecha Dougie pops on alive, I legitimately start getting anxiety that he's gonna like wonder what I'm using, question what the heck I'm doing. And the one thing I told him, I was like, I use a spray varnish, and he put LMFAO, and right away I was like, I know, what kind of a painter am I?
What? No, I don't criticize your stuff like that. No, I'm like you're using that. That's awesome. I'm like, okay, I'm like, oh, that's how you did your hydro. That's pretty sweet. That's pretty smart of you, and you actually caught on to that pretty quickly. And I'm like, good on you, crap. What I was gonna say is like, what Cody would like with one of our how do you say, I'm gonna call it a sibling community because it's kind of related, kind of artsy, kind of crafty, you know. The gunpla community. Some people in there, they love showing their methods, and like you'd hear people pop in on the chat sometimes being like, oh, did you do the hairspray method for this? And some people ask, hairspray, why the hell are you using hairspray and stuff? And then they go on a whole spiel of, oh yeah, this is how you do this with the hairspray. You put it first, then you put a paint over, and that's how you get a nice rusty effect. The hairspray blocks off some of the paint from going in there, so that's how you get an underlayer. And they're so enthusiastic about sharing their methods that it's just like it's really what's the word?
To me, that's healthy.
Yeah, it's a positive outlook on the community because they all just want to help each other. Everyone's sharing tools. And one of my favorite ones was for rust method. They used a silicone barrier liquid that's supposed to go in for molds. And I was like, wait, that exists? And we could actually use that for rust instead of actually using for silicone molds? And it's what I was talking about with Slugger Toys. I'm like, hey, these guys over here, they're casting their own parts, their own add-ons for mechs, and they're using a molding method that looks similar to like a gunpla tree. And he's like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, look, they show a diagram of how to actually make the pouring system a lot easier if you want to use this and stuff. I'm like, the information's right there. Go ham, son.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the hallmark of like a healthy artist community, like in any form, is like actually people who want like to help. Like they want the medium to be explored to the best of its ability by the people within the community. That's like the whole point, right? Otherwise, like if I didn't care, I wouldn't be here. But you know what I mean? I would just be sitting I would just do it myself and not tell anyone, not show videos, not like show my shitty sculpts, not say what type of monster clay I use. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't do it. You know.
And just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you're not going to have to bust ass practicing to get any good at doing it. You know, the knowledge is different than the ability. You know.
Yep.
Well, there's like a spot where, because we've talked about like, you know, selling, because we're all eventually going to sell stuff or whatever, and like if you do become popular enough and your demand outpaces what you can make by hand, like you hit the man hour like cap, right? And once you hit that, you're then pushed. You're topped off of what you can sell, or you're pushed into where Neil is, where you have to then outsource to a factory because you can't produce enough things to fill the demand. And so like he's in a different position than like most of us because he's like there.
I'm not. I mean, I just chose to do some, you know, I still cast resin and stuff. Okay. But I mean, it's just, you know, Sofubi's expensive. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
I guess he made and killer bootlegs and stuff would be more of the way where they've like ascended to a certain point where like they're ultra popular and they need to ship like or move like thousands of pieces to like make their stuff sustainable. So then they have to. That's like what I call a good problem, right? Where your sales are so high that you need to outsource the production.
That's definitely a good problem to have.
I think too, people outsource because they find a lot of problems within doing resin a lot, and two, it's taxing on your body. You can get sick. Oh, yeah. There's safety issues involved in all of that. You know, and within painting things too, that's what's problematic with vinyl is that, you know, that paint can cause neurological issues later on. So, you know, I'm sorry, I'm segueing, but
no,
always wear a mask.
That's legit though, and it's also like to pull on what you're saying there. These are all different disciplines, right? Designing a character or whatever, sculpting it, making a mold, making casts, painting. These are all different disciplines, and we're all trying to do all of them. And like, you know, we can't all be excellent at every one of those things. And like I've seen some artists who were trying to make toys or whatever, and they got to a point where maybe they weren't moving enough stuff or whatever, but they were like, I'm really good at molding and casting, so I'm just going to do that, and I'll make other people's toys instead, because they're still doing the thing that they're good at, and they just kind of let the other stuff go and might occasionally do something for themselves. So it's also like you can, as you go, you can see like, oh, I'm really good at A and B, but I don't like C and D that much. Like, I don't love making molds, but it's a part of like the process, right? So if I want to make the thing, I have to make the mold, and I just have to kind of try to make it as fun as it can be even though it's not our thing I'd really just rather skip over. So
True. I hate molds.
You think as other artists, like back to how sometimes the unsolicited advice and trying to push a standard for the other artists in the scene, is there a place or a means that you would find would be the appropriate way of telling somebody if you saw that they were maybe using like a budget material? Well, what?
Don't use
I
Umu.
am Mr. Budget Material.
Don't use Umu, dude. It sucks. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You know, or pressurize your molds if you're going to pressure cast, because then you're going to get pimples everywhere.
You can, also, another way you can budget is do a brush mold and then do an out. Because like you can control if you can't pressurize stuff, like you could then use like rebound as a brushable mold, and there's others too. Like build it up in layers, right, till it's thick enough, and then make a plaster shell or whatever. Like you don't have to pressurize silicone if you don't have it.
Matrix mold.
Yeah.
When and how would you bring these up to an artist? Like, would you, if you just saw someone's work, would you even bring it up? Or if you saw a process shot, would you feel it was your place at all to kind of reach out to them and be like, hey man, like, what, don't use Umu, you're going to be blowing your budget on that? Or
Dude, and you know what's funny though is like Umu specifically, and I agree with you, Neil, don't use Umu. But I reached out to someone, I was just talking with someone who was making something cool. I got to look through my DMs, see who it was. But I asked them what they used to cast in. They just Umu, and they were like, they're perfect, like awesome pieces. Like I bought one, like it's something that I have here, and it's like just in Umu. So like people can do, like, this is where it's hard for me. Is like people can use materials like completely fine. Do I think it's optimal? No, I usually will just say, well, I use 16 or 15, what, you know, if I need to, whatever, you know, like these are, I don't know. And especially like on a budgetary scale, like that's a point of privilege to actually come at someone's budget on how they're doing things, right? And I think that's really hard one to, like, I wouldn't approach something if someone's like, oh, I can't afford a pressure pot, and it was like, oh, well then here's some ways that I would get rid of bubbles. You make a vibration table with like a fucking broken CD player and a piece of wood and like 2 bottle caps. You know what I mean? Like you can do that and like get some and like get some super slow resin, which is like all like the art resin shit, the super cheap stuff you can get on Amazon that people are using for those things. That stuff is like fucking 24-hour resin, like you're sitting there. So like you can put a vibration table on that and like you can be good to go. Like when
you go to like Reddit resin casting, it's all just people pouring shit into pre-made molds, and they're not pressurized. So they have to be using a slow resin because they're also adding stuff and, you know, swirling in color and shit. So they got to have work time, which means like those alternatives, there are resins that will work for that. Now your design might take a compromise. Like if you want, you know, a piece to have some give, well, those resins aren't going to do that. They're all going to be rigid, you know, and that's a different question.
Yeah.
But like when I volunteer it, as I said earlier, I try not to just like, be the, you know, the guy that's like, I know better, do it the way I do it. Like if you, right. Like if, you know, they like in their post, if they're like, I liked X, Y, and Z about this piece, but I didn't like this part, then I might comment on that because they prompted kind of a request for feedback.
Yeah.
So I think you have to just jump in at some point and like try stuff, and you're going to screw up. Like I've been there. I am there right now, like screwing up and learning from it. You know, I think where this whole conversation came from is like not being upfront about that type of thing and trying to pass it off as something else. Like that's where the, you know, I draw the line anyway.
And it is tough too, because I'm the same way, you know, as other folks that, you know, I'm also one of those people of, you want notes? I've got notes. And looking at, you know, getting on Reddit or whatever and seeing, you know, these posts about, you know, the other resin art where, you know, hey, I made coasters and stuff like that. And obviously I have to bite my lip of realizing, okay, what are they doing and where are they trying to go with their art? You know, if they're trying to take it to the next level, then okay, I might be a little more, you know, likely to offer some advice or something, or, you know, obviously if they ask for it. But you know, if it's somebody that's just like, hey, I made a coaster, I only ever intend to make a coaster in a pre-done mold, dump some stuff in it, and I'm golden, I'm happy. That's all I want. That's all my friends want. is a new set of coasters at home, then I'll bite my tongue. But a lot of it is just kind of seeing, sitting back and seeing, okay, who is this artist and what exactly are they trying to do and achieve? And, do they look like they're looking for a little bit additional knowledge or anything on the topic? Because, I mean, I think for all of us, it's tough to bite our tongues knowing that it is a very expensive, set of mistakes to make when you botch a bunch of casting or molding, just because, the materials are so expensive, so we've been there and it's tough not to point that out to folks of, hey, there is a better way to perhaps do it better where you're not going to go through $200 of materials just to learn this, this one, rookie mistake.
There's nothing wrong with learning with the cheap stuff.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, and I've used the Umu. It works great. It's just not very durable. It's not going to last very long, but it works great as a mold material for if you're only doing one or two pulls, or maybe up to 10 or something like that. But you
get like 10 okay ones out of Umu for sure.
Right. So there's materials like like Cody's saying, there's all kinds of different things you can do with different materials. It's not necessarily a thing that way. But I understand trying to save somebody some money or whatever. But a lot of people don't post their process videos. A lot of people don't show you exactly what they're getting before they get it. And how are we going to know what you're doing? And there's also the other side of I get bogged down in asking a million questions and never doing anything with it because I'm just trying to worried about doing it right. At some point you got to jump in and just try. But yeah, that's what I was saying. If I get something like bubble ridden and I don't post any process pictures and I don't my model that I'm showing everybody is perfect, then you're not going to get a whole lot of return business maybe off of that.
Yeah, a lot of the reason that I post my process stuff, I don't think it's particularly impressive, but it's really nice to know where I'm going wrong and where I could go better next time. And again, if I only showed it off as if it was exactly how I wanted it to be, I would never learn how to get it there in the first place, unless people had you need some shit to work with.
9 times out of 10, if you have a piece in hand though, and you see an imperfection in it, you can go back to the photo and you can usually see why you didn't see it. Death and Strawberries is kind of saying it's all about that transparency, showing the process and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even sometimes that comes down to explaining why there might be a mistake, right? If I don't know that somebody did something or they did something a particular way, I might not understand how they got it to sit a certain way. When we were talking about doing things flat, I actually think it's genius. If you look at Hobo Toys, almost any of the Monster Men, it's it's a 2-part mold, and they'll do it in small layers and stack. Because of course we all know you get less bubbles if you actually do things in small amounts. But what's really dope is by the time you now put these two together and you've got this paper thin amount of gap to fill with resin, all of a sudden you've got this dope triple layered homie that when he stands up from the side, he's going to look like he's all those different parts. The moment you know how resin works and how this person has basically used it on the two sides and slowly kept on just putting layers and then put them together and then filled it, you're like, oh, no bubbles. Crazy. Smart of you. That's amazing. But sometimes you see certain things be said and you're also kind of that worked for you, but I've got to also put in this amount. So for instance, the other day, somebody that is in my opinion, great caster, said earlier, phenomenal caster. Anybody might know exactly what I'm talking about. But they mentioned putting your casts on a 45-degree angle, like molding them on a 45-degree angle. And that is great. That's phenomenal because again, I've even brought up before, if you're swimming in a little underwater cavern and there's an air pocket up there for you to put your head in, it's probably because it's going straight. Whereas if something's angled, there's not gonna be that little air pocket for you to get some air and keep on swimming. But the issue with that is every now and then you're gonna get commissions. And if you make your mold to be completely 45-degree angled and somebody says, hey, I'm gonna need a hard gradient on this figure, you're not getting a hard gradient on that figure. I promise you. It's not gonna happen. Because now the mold is sitting like this. And if you fill up water with pink Kool-Aid or anything like that, and you all of a sudden put the jug on an angle, you're going to watch as the liquid starts to try and go up the side of the jug. And the more that you angle that jug, the more there's going to angle going up that jug. Well, if I freeze that jug like that, and now I pour more on there, I'm going to have an angle right across the line of the mold. So as much as that's great to removing air bubbles, we do also have to, again, look at that intent. Because if your intent is actually to be able to bust out a bunch of figures where the boots are red, but the legs are orange, and it's going to be resin casted that way, not happening now. And your mold is that way. So now you're trying to like compensate for this weird 45-degree angle on a silicone mold, plus the leveling of your actual house, because most people aren't living in a perfectly friggin' level dimension. So suddenly, like, you're compensating for a lot of factors all of a sudden. So it's like, even when we're throwing out tips to people and kind of being like, oh shit, this is how you do this, we also have to kind of be like, oh shit, but also this might happen if you do that.
No, and some
There
people
needs to be more
intuitively-
information like that for sure. There's a lot of information on how to do things, and it's usually by people who know what they're doing. So they can almost forget to mention that, oh, by the way, if you do X, Y, and Z, because there's nothing there prompting them to do it, you know, which is a good, you know, if you show your work, you show your mistakes, and then people are happy to give their knowledge, then it just makes you better, you know.
That's something I struggle with though, is like how much do I share, because I feel like I'm still learning myself.
Yeah,
you know,
I hear you.
Yeah, and like I've got friends that are like, just share it, like spread the knowledge and whatever. And I'm like, well, what if it's wrong? What if I'm telling people something, you know, funky? Like I don't know yet.
Yeah, but then your posts about wax stuff was like, that was hugely helpful for me. Like,
Right?
I'd never done hard wax
Right.
stuff, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, like here's some information on hard wax, which they can't find shit about casting hard
Absolutely.
wax out there. There's like
Really
no
interesting
information. Yeah, there's nothing out there. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, thank you. Like it, right? It's like it doesn't matter. Like it's just the exploration itself. This is why people like process videos, I think, a lot too, and like process videos, or just generally like even like when I was on with you, Crumbs, and Rainbow Yawn, like a week and a half or whatever back, like that was super cool. See him building the mold. He was using monster clay to actually do the mold stuff, and I thought that was awesome, because I mean, like for some if I was doing an actual bootleg, like the self-inflicted one or something, like having a pourable wax, like a pourable substance to do the negative space on like the actual mold is like awesome. Never even thought about you know, like using it. But just seeing that, right? Like just seeing these cool things, you never even see that stuff. It's awesome. It's invaluable, really, is what it comes down to.
So even in one of those lives, though, because back to like the information you share, you don't share, I misinterpreted the intent of this other individual. So somebody asked me the one day, like, so Crumbs, man, like how much would it cost to do a pour? And your brain is thinking, well, what is the cheapest way possible if just a homie at home wanted to just do this for arts and crafts? Like, and you start breaking down, probably like, we can go to the dollar store, and like suddenly you realize afterwards, you're like, oh, the frig, he was trying to figure out how much does it cost to do what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to value what you are doing right now. How much does it cost to do what you're doing? I've never seen somebody do that. And here you are being like, go to Dollarama. You're going to get yourself some dollar paints. And all of a sudden you get home, like after just being like, oh, fuck. If he goes to try this in the same way that I just did this, like, it ain't going to turn out very exciting for him. And so it's like, you almost need to know the intent. We have to, if anything, I would almost say before we give advice on how things should be made better, we have to almost start questioning a little bit more. I don't think many of us do that. We don't approach an artist and be like, yo, homie, I was just curious. Like, did you end up going with that for a reason? And then they can explain it to us. And then we do know where the hell if there is any advice to give.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with what someone said earlier about sharing information when they're still learning and stuff. I remember I was having a conversation with friends, and they're talking about putty, like molding putty, the stuff that like dries afterward, not like stuff that goes into resin mold. And I'm like, hey, what are you actually looking for and stuff? Because I was experimenting with you've seen these pieces, the little plant guys I made, the custom ones. And I was messing with like 3 different types of like putty and stuff because I wanted to figure out what worked best and what was my budget. I'm like, yeah, this one dries solid, very great for sanding, works if you're making a rigid area and stuff. This one's really bendable and stuff, works great if you're going to use like wires in it and stuff and you want to change the position. And I'm like, oh, I learned this shit myself and I taught him what works best. And I'm like, cool, you know, that's awesome. Like, and like the ones I was talking about are like milliput and needite. Needite's a two-parter one. Well, they're both two-parter, but this is like the more flexible one, and this one like dries like really, really solid. And he's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's freaking awesome. I'm gonna order some right away. And I'm like, cool. It's all about learning yourself and then just sharing that knowledge too, finding out what people are looking for at their craft.
That's like a interesting mention because I did that recently I was trying different putties and sculpting materials, trying to make this like hair piece or whatever. And I have epoxy sculpt, I have green stuff or whatever, this like Citadel workshop shit.
Yeah.
And some other clay, polymer clays and whatnot. And it reminded me of you talking about that. The first thing I used like that was plumber's putty, which is this shit. You buy it at Lowe's. It's a real disgusting smelling stuff, and you got to use gloves when you use it. And it's basically like fiberglass and something else inside, and you mash it together. Basically, plumbers use it to repair pipes and stuff. It turns into metal. And I learned about this stuff like 15 years ago when I don't know how many of you are familiar with there used to be a site called conceptart.org. It was just a bunch of forums. And there was this dude on there, his name was Smelly Bug, and he made maquettes for a living for movies. And he had this like 30-page, 40-page tutorial of him sculpting this one thing, and everything from the wire armature all the way through to the end. And so when he builds the armature, and he's using different thicknesses of wire, and so he would use this stuff on like joints and stuff to solidify the shape. And he also would use it he would clump it on for hands, because then once it cured, he could like sand it down into like very fine details that you couldn't do with clay because it just breaks off. And so I was like, and this dude did that for a living. He sculpted maquettes for movies, like for concept art or whatever, costume design. This is over a decade ago. That site's gone now, so that thing is lost. I have it archived because I used to save everything, because I went through that digital hoarding phase. And so every now and then I'll pull up like, the book of PDFs that I have of it and skim through it, looking at like, tips this pro had just put out there for the world to use. So there's all sorts of shit out there. And I use stuff it's not art supplies. I'll use like all sorts of things. Everything's a sculpting material.
Oh, another one was the alginate step for like just using alginate for intermediary casts. Like what a money saver. I was just trying to do like these really simple, like I would use Umu for like an intermediary cast because like it was cheap. I have some from like when I like, it's like somehow still usable. It's over like a year and a half old. That's like sitting there, and I was using it for like 4 things, right? But man, like the alginate, it's just easier. It's just so easy. You can make a single, like all I need is an intermediary step, so I have another hard surface to cast on or to like sculpt on.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that too, because with you and Death and Strawberries talking about it, because I've been thinking about like all the stuff that I'm making, it goes through multiple steps. I do the initial copy cast, and then I chop that apart, and then I modify that. I have to mold that, and often mold it again to do refinements. So I've been thinking about an intermediary mold, and then what resins cure very hard but are also like easily carvable. Mm-hmm. So I think like these shittier like 300s and stuff are like good. That's what I use, is the 300. Like, this is not a permanent thing. This is like an intermediary sculpt. It's an iteration to get to the final piece. It's all that, dude. Steps and shit. Like it's all, just learning the tools. And like I said, no, I wouldn't have known about alginate, but now I do. So
that was a tip from Carter the Conqueror too. He used to work at Kenner back in the day, and he's a Hasbro employee now. And so but he was totally like, here's what we used to do. And my only request is that you guys spread the word and share the love, basically. So
that's awesome.
That's what I wanted to do it myself first and like try it, and then I posted on it. But yeah, that came from him.
Nice.
So dope.
So I think we ended up straying a little bit from the initial conversation today, but it wasn't a bad thing because we ended up actually talking quite a bit about what kind of makes a piece good anyways, I think, and how we can kind of actually improve how pieces are in the community in a nice, healthy way, and where maybe kind of that fine line is. But we have been chatting for about 2.5 hours, so I'm assuming that most of you would like to get on with your evening at this point. So I
I need to go to bed, man.
I kept
What time is it
yours
for
being
you?
So dope over there.
It's not so late actually. It's only like 11:30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
not
working at 8 though. So,
Oh.
but I mean, thanks so much. Loads of fun hanging out with you guys. I'm going to call it off now too.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you so much for all the time on your Saturday, guys, and insights and everything. I really, really appreciate it. I hope that everybody actually has a good rest of the evening as well.
Two
You too,
Crumbs.
Cheers, man. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.